Yes, sir. We have the presentation. You could, you could start the welcome for the online training program.
Should I start?
Yes, sir. Please.
Yes, sir. Please.
No, I cannot see the slides.
Now it is okay with
Yes, now I can see the slides for that. So, good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'll be going through the module 8, that relates with waterborne diseases with respect to climate variability and climate changes. So, in this module, we are going to learn how climate variability and climate changes are related to waterborne diseases and how their impacts can be managed. So, next slide, please. So, the key messages that we are going to cover in this module 8 are that waterborne diseases are mostly orally transmitted diseases, and climate can influence waterborne diseases in different ways. Of course, depending on local environment, local population structure, and many other things of the population, including their cultural and habitual things. Mitigation adaptation will be enhanced by understanding the ecology of the pathogens. So, what we are going to do in this module, what we are going to cover next, is four aspects. First thing is that we'll talk about water quantity and quality. Then we'll go through some of the aspects of burden of diarrheal diseases, how climate and weather affect diarrheal diseases, and also food and waterborne pathogens. We'll also discuss the influence of season, temperature, precipitation, and sea level rise as the climatic parameters. And number 4, we'll also discuss briefly the measures to address these water and foodborne diseases. Next one. As we know that water is an essential component of body and human life, and not only availability of water, that is quantity of water, but both quality and quantity are important, because we know that even we have enough quantity of water, if the quality is poor, that are definitely going to lead many of those waterborne diseases. So in this slide, depicted is that across the large areas of our world, many of which are in lesser developed countries, freshwater sources are already vulnerable due to a combination of contamination and inadequate supply. Many of the predicted trends for these freshwater supplies are for increased areas of drought leading to desertification and decreased crop production and food scarcity, along with increasing water sanitation problems. Because if we have less amount of water, there are bound to be sanitary problems in those areas or among those populations.
Dr. Alok,
Yes.
requesting you, we cannot hear you at all. You can switch on the camera and just be more near to the speaker.
My camera is on.
So maybe if you switch off the camera, the internet connection would be better.
Oh, you are requesting to switch on the camera.
Yes, sir. And
Oh,
your
okay.
voice, if you may have to speak a little bit louder, we cannot hear anything. So sorry, sir.
I'm speaking. So, probably it will be better now. So, already we are seeing that in many areas, water levels are falling. The available quantity of water gradually become lesser, and also the quality of water are impacted, and they are contaminated because of lack of water. Sanitation is affected. So this is the global picture in so many countries, especially in the lesser developed countries. These are happening. So this is of a great concern. If we go for the picture in India, next slide, please. You can see that in India, 50% of the country are expected to face high water stress, and many of these areas are in the western and northwestern regions, and also in the southern regions. A little better is some of the states or areas in the eastern region and the coastal region west. But eventually, if we do not take measures now, immediately, the other areas are also bound to serious water scarcity problem. Next one, please. Next one, please. Here we are trying to just elaborate what is related to the development of these, because there are many ways that water can contribute to production of disease and affect human health. When we call waterborne diseases, actually there are many categories: waterborne, water-washed, water aerosol disease, water-based disease, and water-related arthroborne diseases. So most prominent is the waterborne diseases that happens through ingestion of fecal-orally contaminated infectious through water. This ingestion of water contaminated by human or even animal feces or urine containing pathogenic bacteria or parasites lead to the diseases, as you can see in this table. However, transmission of fecal-orally transmitted diseases can also develop from shortage, not only during flooding when the water is contaminated, but also during shortage of water. Because in case of long-term shortage of water, the hygienic level of population is bound to be lowered, and that may provide more opportunity for the pathogens by direct person-to-person contact. Those waterborne diseases with winter or dry related with this type of transmission. In some infectious diseases, for example, legionellosis, the microbes operate in water and infect humans when they inhale the infected aerosols. There are also infestations in which the intermediate vectors are often water-living organisms, and water can be a good media for transmission of these diseases. For The voice is breaking. Is my voice clear or is it breaking? Hello.
Sir, due to the network issues, we have
Yes,
this issue.
actually, because I also sometimes cannot hear your voices clearly. So, can I mute and then unmute again? And see?
Yes, please, sir. We can check once it is put and then unmute again.
So, my IT expert is also here. He said it may be a little better if you leave and then join. So, is it okay, or should I continue? Because I understand that the quality of audio is also not good. So, do you suggest me to continue?
Yes, sir. Yes, please continue. I just probably at the moment speed. Broadband can connect to speed and we can move on. And meanwhile, we can expect the present our voices mute.
Okay, continue, because most of the slides are self-explanatory, and I think in a few slides some more explanations may be required, but otherwise most slides are explanatory, so the audience can understand those slides. So for water diseases, we all know that there are many mosquito-borne infectious diseases, and the presence of stagnant water is an essential condition for the survival of their larvae. In this group of diseases, rainfall is very important determinant for the disease transmission. So, yes, I understand. Yes, so many people are putting the remarks in chat box.
Sir, we do understand there is a network issue. Probably we can mute and then we can mute ourselves so that we can hear and then we can see the slides. It's just a request from our side.
Let me continue. So here, I'm trying to show the fecal transmission of diarrheal diseases. So, in this poster, it is illustrated the points at which we might start to investigate the mechanisms that provide us a crucial link between a climate signal and a disease such as diarrhea. Here it is evident that the pathways from source to exposure is very complex. This is not very simple. While we are interested in the human endpoints, which is at the far right of the chart, many of these diarrheal diseases are also zoonotic, and therefore transmission pathways must include both human and animal contamination. The pathogens can be transmitted from person to person in some cases, or indirectly through contamination of food products, groundwater, and surface water. Next, just like this. Next, we'll look at how much burden the diarrheal disease poses to us. Next one, please. Yes. So, overall water stress, both from flooding and is the fact that waterborne and foodborne diseases continue to be significant causes of morbidity and mortality globally, specifically for the underdeveloped world. And the wide spectrum of diseases that are associated with food and especially water, gastroenteritis is the most commonly identified. As you can see, these diseases contributed to as many as 4 million cases annually and 1.8 million deaths. This figure published by WHO in 2004. So now the figures have so I think we will update it in the next. But still, as a diarrheal disease institute, we know that there are still a lot of burden from diarrheal disease, especially in one. Next one. Next one. We all know that there are an estimate of global burden of disease in 2016. As per that estimate, water, sanitation, and hygiene was responsible for around 1.3 lakh annual deaths from diarrhea and around 2% of the global burden of diseases in terms of dialysis. It was also suggested that improvements in drinking water, hygiene, and sanitation might reduce 10% of total global disease burden. In India, due to diarrhea occurs mostly in states like Bihar, Jharkhand, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, and Assam, and also in some states in South. Sorry, please go back. Okay. So in this chart, it is shown that diarrheal diseases are the largest contributor to waterborne disease burden worldwide, because waterborne disease means many other diseases or health conditions, even other than diarrhea, but diarrhea is the most important contributor. Given the global problem associated with diarrheal disease and its common relation with water, our discussion of climate and waterborne diseases will focus primarily on pathogens and gastroenteritis. In this figure, please also note that the relative significance of browning is important as a source of disease. So, next one, please. According to the updated estimation of burden of diarrheal diseases by WHO, the overall premature deaths from due to diarrhea will increase up to almost 7,000 in 2030 and around 65,000 by 2050. It is of note that economic growth is closely related to deaths from diarrheal diseases, resulting in a decreasing tendency of deaths in the future expectations. You will see that the peak part in the middle, where high economic growth condition is expected, so the deaths, premature number of premature deaths are lower than the base rate. Whereas if the will the premature death will increase. So next one. Now let's look at how climate and weather affects diarrheal diseases and food and waterborne pathogens. Of the critical issues in studying the specific impacts of climate on health and specifically the impacts on waterborne diseases, but the need to identify broad trends in disease outcome and identify mechanisms that lead to these trends, especially in terms of the biology and physiology of specific pathogens. Next, to begin with the discussion of how waterborne diseases may be impacted by climate change, we need to focus a bit on climate change scenarios and which climate parameters are expected to have the greatest impact on waterborne pathogens and diseases. We'll go through mechanisms and provide some specific examples of research that address these issues. And wherever possible, examples of the two ways of examining climate change impacts will be addressed, which is studies that look at specific health endpoints and studies that address mechanisms of this. So the first area, next one, the first area of impact of climate and weather on diarrheal diseases and food and waterborne diseases is seasons. So we first define seasons. Next one, please. Seasons on diarrheal disease. So next one. Here you can see a chart on your left-hand side. This is a chart of hospitalization rates of children with rotavirus infection. This shows a powerful trend in seasonality that are evident in many other enteric diseases also. And here you can see the trends by latitude, which is present on the right-hand side of the chart, the specific latitude of those areas. For 99 studies conducted since 1995 from Americas, Europe, Africa, and Asia, and Oceania. In all regions, rotavirus rates become increasing as latitude increase, with the highest rates in the winter months for temperate zones in both the northern and southern hemisphere. In lower latitudes of the tropics, this marked seasonality, however, is damped down. And finally, in the equatorial zones, there is almost no seasonality. Equatorial zones means around 10 to 12 degrees north and south of the equator. So there is one chart in between which shows this plus 10 to 12 degree north and south. So there is no such prominent seasonality. This series of charts does not indicate relative rates of infection between these areas, but it shows that the disease trends vary less by season in the warm parts of the world. Now, what is the implication of this? Well, this cannot be used to predict future scenarios. The kind of evidence that is used to guide specific investigations into possible disease trends under a changing climate scenario. For example, if seasonality is related to temperature, can we expect an expansion of the tropical patterns into the temperate areas? So these kinds of questions arise these evidences. There is another factor, that socioeconomic status, which is put to the right-hand side. Series of charts on this right side shows a difference in the magnitude of seasonality between countries with different economic status. Economic countries have more prominent seasonality pattern. Now, while this slide baseline information for questions about disease trends and climate change, the next few slides will illustrate how these questions might be addressed. So next one, please. Yes. So in the next few slides, we'll move on to specific diarrheal diseases. Here we're focusing on Salmonella. So Salmonella infection makes up the most common causes of bacterial-associated gastroenteritis worldwide. These bacteria are also zoonotic, so that is very interesting, and found commonly among both livestock and wildlife populations. And they also both show similar seasonality with different peaks in reported cases occurring in the summer months worldwide. The study by us and others have investigated these trends across continental scale to determine the contribution of temperature to these incidents. So here from different parts, from different countries, they have depicted by months the magnitude of salmonella infections, and in almost all the countries, the trend is similar. The peak is around the summer months. So next one. So after seasonality, next one. After seasonality, we'll look at another climatic parameter, which is temperature. So how is it related to diarrheal diseases? We'll go through some slides to depict. So next one. Yes. So this is a very popular graph where CL examined the relationship between annual average temperature at Pacific with the rates of diarrheal disease. And you can see that a significant positive effect on temperature is there, which can be seen prominently in this chart. As the annual average temperature increases, which is on the x-axis, the rate of diarrheal cases, which is on the y-axis, also increases. So it kind of relates the temperature with occurrence of diarrheal diseases, showing an increasing trend of diarrheal diseases with increasing temperature. There is another good study conducted here in the next. Next one, please. Yes. So in this study conducted in Laos also shows a correlation between various waterborne diseases and temperature. You can see that dysentery and typhoid fever have lead correlation with temperature. However, severe diarrhea has a threshold between 26 and 28 degrees Celsius. Diarrhea, as they have found, overall diarrhea, severe diarrhea, they have a window period where the severe diarrhea peaks. As some of you may know, we also tried to do this something like this, and where we found that in the eastern region country, the diarrhea peaks within a window of like 30 to 34 degrees Celsius. Because it does not only depend on the temperature, but also humidity and other factors. So the third parameter, climatic parameter that we looked at is the effect of precipitation. Please go for yes, yeah. No. Please go forward. Go forward. 2 slides forward. Another, yeah, please. Thank you. So this study happened in Peru, and they also found a good relationship. And that here the interesting thing was that in addition to outbreak, they tried to relate it to El Nino phenomenon. And they found that El Nino also brought about an outbreak of diarrheal diseases in Peru. A cohort study on the children in the capital city Lima shows that the risk of diarrheal disease markedly increased during the episode of El Nino, which is a climatic phenomena that was period in the tropical Pacific Ocean. So, diarrheal disease are different types of diarrheal disease, and along with the other waterborne diseases are very well linked with amount of precipitation. If it is less, then also it is sometimes detrimental. If it is more, of course, it is of many diseases. In addition to temperature, changes the hydrologic cycle, leading to either flooding or drought, thus can influence levels of pathogens in waters and other diseases to humanity. So we look at examples of the influence of flooding and drought, water and food diseases next. So next one, yeah. So the major issues that are associated with flooding that influence waterborne diseases include direct exposure or contact with contaminated water. Following large floods, sewage overflows and septic systems are common, and that can result in contaminated standing water. Exposure to flood waters commonly lead to infections of the skin, respiratory system, eyes, and ears. Floods can also result in contaminated water sources and gastroenteritis due to ingestion of untreated or insufficient water. Floods also facilitate the secondary spread of diseases due to poor hygiene following flood events and the displacement of people. Next slide will show a map where you can see that annual global flood exposure is predicted that it may increase over the century by 4 to 14 times as compared to the 20th century. Under a scenario of moderate population growth, as defined by UN, the global number of exposed people is projected to increase by a factor of 70 to 25. Exposed people means flood exposed people, with strong increases in Asia and Africa due to high population growth. So next one. In looking at the endpoint of outbreaks of waterborne disease in association with rainfall, there was one study, Curiero et al., who reported that 51% of drinking water outbreaks in the United States between 1948 and 1994 occurred following rainfall events that were in the 90th percentile, and 68% were by rainfall event in the 80th percentile on a water level. The associations were noted. These associations are noted for both surface water and groundwater. So these shows large water shed boundaries, and each of the dots on the map represents a waterborne disease outbreak. The open circles designated the 90th percentile rain event. So he tried to associate higher rainfall with occurrence of diarrhea outbreaks. Next one. There is also an example of the effects of extreme precipitation on waterborne disease, where we can elucidate some of the mechanisms in addition to the health endpoints. This is from Ontario outbreak of 2000. Rainfall levels were historically high in the days preceding these outbreaks. If you see those maps, near the outbreak area, rainfall reached up to 150 millimeter within a 4-day period. And this was estimated to be 60 to 100 year event for this area. So, with huge rainfall in a shorter time, there are outbreaks in the Ontario area. Thus, again, in other countries, they could find a link between period and outbreak of diarrhea. Next one. Now, here you can see that over a very short time frame, around 2,300 people became ill in community, while the total population was 4,800. So almost 50% of the population got infected, and there are 7 deaths reported. This outbreak was primarily due to Campylobacter and E. coli 0157H7. This outbreak was due to fecal contamination in a groundwater well. Although inquiries showed a breakdown in the multiple barrier approach to water protection, the outbreak was ultimately led to extremely high rainfall amounts preceding the outbreak, resulted in contamination of the well. So, in this chart, the progression of outbreak is shown on the top of the graph in red, while the daily precipitation is shown in blue color at the bottom. And you can see a correlation, good correlation with the heavy rainfall in the middle, with the occurrence of the outbreak also in the middle at this around the same time. Next one. This study is from Tata. There are cases of protoparasitic disease, disease. They are also linked to preceding rainfall events. Like earlier, for Campylobacter, Cryptosporidium is a zoonotic agent and is often associated with cattle, waterfowl, and other reservoirs that can contribute to contamination, in addition to human waste. Results from this study indicated that infections from both human-specific strain, that is Cryptosporidium bovis, and zoonotic strain, that is Cryptosporidium followed similar patterns with increasing incidence with rainfall. So this elimination from runoff of either human or animal results in next one. There is no building evidence association between disease and increased precipitation, especially with heavy rainfall events. In addition, several other studies noted pathogen loads related to floods, runoff, and heavy precipitation, including enteric viruses such as enterovirus, norovirus, adenovirus, etc., protozoan parasites like Cryptosporidium, and others, and also enteric bacteria like Salmonella, Campylobacter, E. coli, and other indicator bacteria. So, next one. Although there are fewer specific studies that relate waterborne disease incidence to drought and projection of changes in disease incidence with drier conditions, it is generally accepted that reduction in water supply can be expected to result in increasing pressure on limited water sources. Additionally, as sources are more limited, they potentially experience increasing concentrations of pathogens due to a variety of influences, including increased use for multiple purposes and the contribution of wastewater, whether treated or untreated, to the total water volume. The effects of reservoir storage volume on water quality in general is noted in this field. And it is at 20 less of capacity, all users will experience water quality issues. Next one, please. Yes, so here the study was conducted in Mongolia in 2009. We can see the cases of sigellosis with the flow rate of water. When the flow rate is smaller, the incidence of dysentery due to sigellosis is much higher. But as the flow rate increases, it gradually comes down and almost linearly. So there is a good evidence that scarcity of water also, there are many pathogens that can cause diarrheal disease and waterborne diseases. NCDC. Next one, please.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry. Yes. sir. Could you just mute your mic, sir?
I could not hear. I could not understand.
Sir, please, could you mute your mic?
Yes, please move ahead.
Yes, sir. Sir, could you just please mute your mic so that I can have a few words with you? Because a lot of disturbance. Yes, sir. Sorry to interrupt in between, and we are extremely sorry because many of the participants were not audible, and the quality of the sound was, really very bad to hear about. We could not get your audio clearly, sir. So we would like to, can you just log out and then wait for a few minutes and then log in so that we will be continuing with the new speaker, the next speaker.
Okay,
Sir,
I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. I'll log out and then log in again.
Yeah, we'll integrate you in a state of tone, and we'll be now moving on to the next presenter.
All right. Fine.
Sorry for the interruption and sorry for the inconvenience, sir. We'll let you know.
No, I understand. I fully understand because I also I can also see that audio quality is.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and we are extremely sorry for the presentation, and the audio quality was not really clear for everybody. And I heard many of the participants and the panelists who could not hear the presentation properly. So we have asked Dr. Alok Kumar sir to get us back in few minutes. While he's getting back, so we would welcome Dr. Prema Ramchandran madam for the presentation on food security and malnutrition. Good afternoon, ma'am. We welcome you for the online training session.
Good afternoon. I'm trying to share my video, but looks like, can you hear me clearly now? No problem, no?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you clearly.
Okay, share content.
Good afternoon, Dr. Prema Ramchandran. This is Dr.
Yes.
Sakshan. I joined NCDC recently.
Yes. I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to join you all and address an unbelievable number of some 300 districts from all over India. Climate change and food security is the topic about which I will be talking today. Why are we worried about this? We are worried about it because food is a very important determinant of nutrition and health status of the population. And therefore, all efforts of health, economics, education, and various modalities of improvement in quality of life cannot happen without some assurance about food security. In this context, food security of the population, especially those of the vulnerable groups, had always received priority attention both globally and certainly in India. There has been changing concepts about food security over the last 70 years. In the 1950s and 1960s, food security was defined essentially as consuming sufficient quantity of energy and protein, that is food quantity. In the 1980s, the importance of micronutrients for balanced and nutritional diet was well recognized, and so vegetables and animal products were increasingly recognized as essential component of food security. The 90s brought one another knowledge. Problems of absorption of nutrients or excessive loss of nutrients, as happens in respiratory infection, can adversely affect food utilization even if adequate amounts are consumed. You are making huge noises. This third dimension, namely food utilization, has become increasingly prominent for the food security discussions since 1990s. The World Food Summit 1996 redefined food security as food security exists when all the people at all the times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet all the dietary needs and food preferences for an active, healthy life. It therefore brought availability of food, access, including economic access to food, appropriate health for utilization of the balanced diet, and finally, the stability of all these three dimensions as four pillars that are essential for food security. What happens when food security doesn't exist? There are different dimensions of food insecurity. Food insecurity can be acute or chronic. Acute food insecurity is usually associated with natural or man-made disasters. Severe and prolonged acute food insecurity, that is famine, is life-threatening and requires energetic and effective interventions. Chronic food security can be transient, that is short-term and temporary as during drought, or can be long-term and persistent. This is poverty in marginalized segments of population. Food insecurity results in inadequate food consumption, and persistent chronic food insecurity and low food consumption result in undernutrition and micronutrient deficiencies. I hope this explains the reason why health professionals are increasingly worried about climate change and food insecurity, because food insecurity leads to inadequate food consumption. Inadequate food consumption, both in terms of quality and quantity, lead to undernutrition and micronutrient deficiencies. I will now move on how climate change affects food security. First, I will talk briefly about the global scenario and then move on to the Indian scenario. Climate change increases temperature. In fact, that is the one that was most widely recognized initially, reduces freshwater resources and food production. Climate change induced natural calamities can cause acute food insecurity. Increase in drought may lead to agricultural labor migration, joblessness, and persistent food insecurity due to poverty. In the global climate change scenario, Asia is one of the most worst affected continents. And because Asia has a high population and a population density, this continent will also have the highest proportion and numbers of people suffering from adverse consequences of climate change. The World Food Programme every year prepares a global hunger map. If you look at India, we seem to be reasonably okay because India grows adequate food grains to meet the growing population's needs. Indians are short-statured and small-made. Majority are sedentary. Current average food intake is sufficient to meet their energy requirements, but the micronutrient needs are not fully met because of extremely low vegetable intake, especially intake of micronutrient-rich green, yellow, and orange vegetables. World Food Programme grades India as having food insecurity below 15%. One of the silver linings of Asia's problems with global climate change is that as far as food security is concerned, if the recent trends in food insecurity and undernutrition persist, there will be substantial improvement in Asia. Asia currently has about 55% of undernourished person in the world. Undernourished for this is defined as anybody having inadequate food, earlier defined globally as 2100 calories or less energy intake. From this, despite of the fact that over the next 10 years, there may be many buffets from climate change, Asia's share in the global food insecurity will come down to 39%, a substantial 15% reduction. The continent that is going to suffer most in terms of undernutrition and food insecurity is Africa. Their share of undernourished will increase from 36% to 51%. So, relatively, Asia, which has been trying to tackle food insecurity related problems generally very effectively in the last 3 decades, is, if its efforts continue over the next decade, might in fact not have very many serious problems or at least any further aggravation of food insecurity. We'll next move on to climate change and food insecurity in Indian scenario. In India, agriculture is heavily dependent on monsoon. Scarcity of groundwater in many parts of India can pose a major threat to agriculture, especially the drought-prone areas in the Western India and Deccan Plateau during monsoon failure are really drought-prone. The Gangetic Valley and Assam are 2 areas which are flood-prone and during floods face acute food insecurity. The coastal areas, initially we used to think it is Bay of Bengal coastal area, but increasingly even the Arabian Sea is getting hit by cyclones, and during these periods, people face acute food insecurity. Acute food insecurity has to be managed in the Indian context predominantly as a part of disaster management programs. How does climate change affect food security in India? Climate change can affect all 4 dimensions of food security: food production, food availability, food accessibility, food utilization, and food system stability. You had earlier seen how diarrheal diseases and other diseases, waterborne diseases, can severely impair food utilization in the earlier presentation. Food production can be affected because of increase in maximum and minimum temperature in many regions of the country, increase in drought-prone regions, increase in seasonal rainfall in some regions, and in some regions, decrease in seasonal rainfall. Delay or unseasonal rainfall in some regions will also interfere with agricultural food production. Increase in weather, extreme events such as floods and cyclone can disrupt agriculture for months on end in affected areas. These changes can be regional, seasonal, or persistent. Persistent effects have to be documented, and efforts to mitigate the adverse consequences have to be evolved, tested, and implemented. Very often, people ask me, how can you say what is happening is due to climate change? We do not have to really say that. there are methods by which we have to tackle drought, flood, unseasonal rains, cyclones. So acute and food insecurity as well as chronic food insecurity are there already, had always been there. The magnitude and the seasons in which they occur are now going to increase. So essentially, if we build up our capacity to deal with both chronic and acute food insecurity due to drought, floods, and cyclones, we will be able to mitigate the adverse consequences associated with climate change. While persistent efforts can be documented and efforts can be directed towards mitigate the adverse consequences, seasonal changes are difficult to predict, and catastrophic events are known only after the catastrophe has hit us. They have to be tackled through much better prepared disaster management preparations. Climate change can indirectly affect nutritional status because of low food production affecting availability and cost of food. These result in food insecurity of the vulnerable population, households, or vulnerable individuals. How can we mitigate climate change related food insecurity in India? Relatively simple things have been worked out by various segments, and that is what I am summarizing here. Increase in drought-prone areas will adversely affect cereal production and animal husbandry assets. What do? We increase investment in pulse and millet cultivation in such areas so that these can become available as food products, and when they sell, some amount of economic impact will also be there in the affected regions, agricultural and animal husbandry workers. There can be loss of livelihood and purchasing power of rural poor due to climate change, and this in turn can adversely affect household food security and dietary intake. When these persist, they may adversely affect nutritional status, especially of the vulnerable groups. In the affected areas, non-farm employment, focused efforts to improve employment under NREGA, improvement in supplementary feeding under ICDS and MDM can all help in mitigating adverse impact of food security and nutritional status. Unseasonal rains and increasing humidity may increase post-harvest losses on one side and chances of contamination of the produce by toxic plants and fungi such as aflatoxin in groundnut. Surveillance and monitoring for these are to be built up so that timely interventions can be initiated. How do we improve sustainable agriculture during the era of climate change and also ensure adequate food security? Improving sustainable agriculture has many components. Of course, the desirable one is to reduce the ecological footprints of climate change. That's not essentially within our purview, however much we desire it. Agricultural safety nets have to be built in. Sustainability should be increased by increasing agricultural biodiversity. And above all, agricultural innovations hold the key for successful mitigation of adverse consequences of climate change on agriculture. India has been making efforts to improve food security using multiple multi-sectored interventions. The National Food Security Mission and National Horticultural Mission were set up in 2005 and 2007 for ensuring that all foodstuffs needed for improving household food security and optimal nutrition at individual level are made available, accessible, and affordable. To reduce the wastage, numerous research efforts have been funded by Department of Agriculture, Department of Biotechnology, Department of Science and Technology, so that we resuscitate the age-old practice of drying a huge number of vegetables when they are available readily. Sun, of course, is available in most of the country, in most of the seasons. Dried potatoes, dried tomatoes, green leafy vegetables, whatever type that you may want, can all be dried. Focus is always on sun drying, but it can be supplemented by electrical drying so that no produce need ever go waste. This is a very important measure because currently India is producing more vegetables than cereals and pulses put together. And you all hear periodically farmers throwing all their produce on the road because they cannot transport it economically to the markets because prices have crashed, and urban population always complaining they are unable to eat vegetables because they are unaffordable. Both these catastrophes can be prevented by ensuring that all vegetables during abundant season are dried, quality controlled, stored adequately and appropriately, so that shelf life is increased and it can be transported readily across the country and made available at an affordable cost, irrespective of all the nature's vagaries on climate. We also have another major intervention to improve food security of the population. India is the first country in the world to provide subsidized food grains as a legal entitlement to over 2/3 of its citizens. National Food Security Act aims to improve household food security through this entitlement. Priority households get 5 kg of food grain per person per month. The poorest of the poor, Antyodaya households, are entitled for 35 kg per household per month. The combined coverage under both these is 75% in rural population and 50% of the urban population. All of us saw during the COVID epidemic provisions under NFSA being utilized to provide free food grains, and in many urban areas, 2 hot-cooked meals to all persons who needed them, and came to facilities to access them between April 2020 and November 2020. These measures prevented acute food insecurity, especially among laborers who were left jobless during lockdown, and subsequent slow improvement in employment and very low emoluments even for those who got employment. India is very lucky that Indian diets are predominantly vegetarian. Cereals and pulses are traditionally included in almost every meal. Over the last decade, there has been an increase in vegetable consumption. If available and affordable, the consumption will increase. So the Eat Right movement, which has been talked about quite a lot in the last 2 years, can truly, really be implemented without any great problems in our country, because our diet is predominantly vegetarian and cereal pulse vegetable based. In 2020, the ICMR expert group on nutrient requirement has revised the nutrient requirements of Indians. This revision became necessary for 3 reasons. Number 1, there are a lot more of data available today on actual nutrient requirement based on sophisticated research technologies. Second, we now know that Indians have by and large become sedentary and therefore require much less food as compared to moderately active Indian a couple of decades earlier. And the third is that we realize that while energy adequacy has been met, micronutrient requirement, fiber needs, antioxidant needs have not been thought of and inculcated into the population or included in the diets sufficiently so that they can protect against the emerging problem of overnutrition and associated non-communicable diseases. Currently, the average requirement of Indian is only about 1700 or 1650 kilocalories. The food plates, one for high income group and one for low income group, shows how carbohydrate, protein, and vegetables are to be taken by this population, taking into account their availability, traditional habits of eating, and affordability. These diets will provide reasonably good amount of micro and macronutrients, antioxidants, and dietary fiber needed to maintain optimal nutrition and health. These predominantly plant-based diets are ecologically appropriate, provide crop diversification, and improve farmers' income. They will also prevent overnutrition and reduce the risk of non-communicable diseases. To sum up, India fares well in terms of food security indicators. India is self-sufficient in food production. MDG targets for poverty reduction have been achieved in India by 2012, 3 years ahead of the MDG target. Under NFSA, 2/3 of Indians are entitled to get subsidized food grains. During COVID epidemic, we saw this provision could be used to provide free food grains and cooked meal and prevent food insecurity and undernutrition during lockdown and subsequent slow job return during the unlocking process. Average energy intake of Indian population, that is around 1700 kilocalories, is sufficient to meet the energy requirement of short-statured, sedentary Indian population. As a result, there has been some reduction in undernutrition rates across age groups. However, there has been a steep reduction in physical activity and relatively lower reduction in dietary intake as compared to the reduction in physical activity has resulted in a rise in overnutrition rates in Indian adults. Finally, I'll tell you how to draw an action plan for climate change at district level. It's important to match the current weather situation and meteorological predictions to plan crops to be grown district-wise. District level, current food security and nutritional status of the population can be obtained from available data on Annual Health Survey, District Level Household Survey, and NFHS 5. Every year, district-specific annual action plan can be drawn up using all these data. To begin with, this exercise can be done for vulnerable districts identified by NITI Aayog for intensive intervention for improving food security and nutritional status. What are the non-agricultural interventions in the action plan? Action plan should include interventions under employment guarantee programs, public distribution system, and food supplementation programs under MDM and ICDS in order to address the issues of chronic food insecurity. As I said earlier, floods, cyclones, and other calamity-related acute food insecurity has to be always tackled as a part of disaster management programs. Strengthening the ongoing nutrition surveillance and monitoring is important to assess the adverse impact of climate change on food security and nutritional status, and also the impact of interventions to minimize them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prema Ramachandran, for an excellent overview of food security and with reference to climate change. Thank you, and also giving a brief idea to the district level participant about the drawing up district level action plan with reference to food. I would request any of the participants, do you have any question, query, clarification to ask about from Dr. Prema Ramachandran? Any question you can put in the chat box.
Was that presentation quite audible, Doctor?
Yes, madam, it was quite, I mean, it was absolutely clear. Everybody, I mean, we could hear word by word, and it was an excellent presentation, ma'am. And then the points that you stressed upon was on climate. Thank you, madam. Thank you. And Dr. Renuka, could you just get us updates on the questions and the comments and the remarks? If you could come over.
Yes, Dr. Praveen. Good evening, ma'am. Very nice presentation and all the good remarks from participants. So there is this question about what is the option for unfortified food, which is being promoted by international partners. What is your opinion, and would it help in meeting the food security? And is that a valid option in India?
Thank you. That's an important issue that has to be addressed. Not necessarily as a part of food security, but as one of the major problems faced by the country is micronutrient malnutrition. And so this is one method of addressing them. We have to remember that dietary diversification is the best method of tackling micronutrient deficiencies in the country. But having said that, there are some micronutrient deficiencies which are currently not amenable to this dietary diversification propagated reduction. Typical example, oft quoted, is iodine. All over the world and in India, iodine is not to be met by increasing dietary diversification because there are areas in the country which are iodine deficient right from soil, food grown in the soil, water that they drink. So it has to be met by fortification. You have to be selective about it. When you find such a thing, India has resorted mandatory fortification with iodine. It has succeeded between the time when it was mandated in 2007 and 2015. From 50% of the household access salt, you have got access 95%. So if selected properly, two things, what nutrient and what vehicle. Perhaps iron will fall under similar kind of situation. But indiscriminate fortification of a variety of stuffs with a multiple micronutrient will never address the issue of either micronutrient deficiency or prevent some segments of population from getting more than adequate dose and therefore have the potential risk of reaching beyond the tolerable upper limit and facing toxic effects of excessive intake. So if we know what is needed by all or most of all, and if we know a vehicle that will carry that micronutrient to that population, then a single foodstuff can be fortified with a single fortificant. That would have a benefit, but it cannot address the widespread multiple micronutrient deficiency, and therefore the answer to that problem, that component of food insecurity, is only through dietary diversification. And don't forget, fiber is essential, antioxidants are essential. We are trying to prevent non-communicable diseases. So if you swallow a pill or if you eat a fortified foodstuff, you will not get those benefits. We need to understand that very, very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Prema.
Dr. Renuka, any other comments or remarks or appreciations for Dr. Prema Ramchandran, Madam.
Yes, sir. There's one more question. It is about, is there a change in RDA of sedentary workers and moderate workers' diet? This is question by Dr. Anupama Arya. Ma'am, is the question clear? The question is there a change in RDA of sedentary workers and moderate workers' diet?
Yes. The change is earlier till 2010, we were prescribing recommended dietary allowances, which were aimed at covering 97.7% of the population with adequate nutrients. We now increasingly realize that excess in some population is also likely to be a problem. We knew it much better, much earlier with energy, but we are increasingly realizing that it's also a problem in subsegments with excessive intake of micronutrients. So India has changed over in 2020 to what is called as estimated average requirement, which is 50% of what people require, not 97% of what people require. So therefore, there has been an apparent reduction. There is some reduction because we now know we don't need that much because of technically doubly labeled water, doubly labeled isotope studies have shown that we don't really require that much energy. We don't require that much protein. It is essentially some essential amino acids that we lack. So those also contributed, but the major contribution of the apparent decline in the amount of all nutrients is because we have shifted from recommended dietary allowances to estimated average requirement. That is not really directly related to climate change, but it is the one that is giving you the hope that we can reach 2030 despite of all climate change problems, because we are able to produce adequate food for all the population now, and that will be present in 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Now that I think so, we would move on to the next presentation from Nimans, Bangalore. I think we would welcome Dr. Rahul and Dr. Naveen for this presentation on mental health associated with climate change. If you could put on your cameras on Dr. Rahul and Dr. Naveen, so that we would be having few words, and then we will play the presentation on. Dr. Rahul. Yes, Dr. Rahul, we welcome you for the online training session.
Thank you so much, sir. So it's been wonderful presentations. Previous presenters have given a lot of insight into their own areas regarding how climate change has been affecting. So I think Dr. Naveen is on another meeting and call. So I think he'll join in some time. But let me just go through some of the things which the presentation is going to talk about. So it's a voice over presentation which is there. So it is self-explanatory in terms of what the mental health and how climate change and mental health are interrelated right now. So it is a very new and emerging concept in terms of our mental health related issues. So what we try to do is we try to see how and explain how climate change can have an impact on mental health, and what are the things which is relevant to the climate change in terms of mental health issues or problems. We try to put it across. We have also tried to incorporate some of the research and the data which has been available over the period of years in terms of extreme climatic events, like how Prema ma'am and other Alok sir was talking about in terms of extreme climate events. So for us, it is more in terms of disaster related things, which mental health is most commonly affected, and a lot of research has been done. So we try to put some of the research related in the Indian subcontinent, what are the things which has been done for during that extreme climatic events, and also incremental climate changes. So how incremental climate changes over the period of years or decades has been having an effect on the mental health, and some new concepts have been emerging in mental health purview itself, like something called as eco anxiety or climatic anxiety is something which is a new trend which has been started in the recent years, maybe you can say in the post millennium time. We also try to incorporate what can be done out, or what are the mitigation measures which can be taken for this, to deal with the mental health issues pertaining to climate change, and who are all the stakeholders in it, and what kind of roles can be given, and how to have, because for mental health issues it is little difficult to measure in terms of the changes and also the interventions. So we try to give an overview of all those things. So let's go to the presentation, and then maybe we will be able to come up with some of the queries and clarifications, and then we can take discussion forward, sir.
Yes, Dr. Rahul, we would be sharing the presentation online, and then it's a voiceover presentation, so we would be uploading we will be uploading the presentation right away.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much.
I welcome you all on training module for climate change and mental health. The key points for today's presentation are: Indian subcontinent is vulnerable to climate events and disasters, and there is a history of significant impact on human beings. There is emerging evidence of impact of these climate changes on mental health as well. As there is not much that we can do to prevent it right now, we need to focus on early warning and response systems. Nodal officers may play a key role in the implementation of these programs. In today's presentation, we will deal with the following topics. We'll start with climate change and mental health, research and evidence, interventions, and tasks for nodal officers and DMHP program officers. Coming to climate change and mental health scenario in India, although the attribution of mental health outcomes related to climate change remains debatable, but there are emerging evidence that say that all these extreme events may have adverse effect on mental health of a person as well. We do know that they can be manifested in several direct, indirect, and overarching effects, and it may have a disproportionate effect among those who are already marginalized, like special population, like children, aged people, and women. This can occur alongside other physical, medical, social, and economic consequences of climate changes. The extreme climate change can actually trigger mental illnesses like post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, anxiety, cause substance abuse, or may lead to suicidal ideation. It can also complicate the already existing grief, may lead to survivor's guilt, and may cause recovery fatigue. The impact of disaster is different at different stages. The acute impact of these disasters can lead to mental I welcome you all on training module for climate change and mental health. The key points for today's presentation are: Indian subcontinent is vulnerable to climate events and disasters, and there is history of significant impact on human beings. There is emerging evidence of impact of these climate changes on mental health as well. As there is not much that we can do to prevent it right now, we need to focus on early warning and response systems. Nodal officers may play a key role in the implementation of these programs. In today's presentation, we will deal with the following topics. We'll start with climate change and mental health, research and evidence, interventions, and tasks for nodal officers and DMHP program officers. Coming to climate change and mental health scenario in India, although the attribution of mental health outcomes related to climate change remains debatable, but there are emerging evidence that say that all these extreme events may have adverse effect on mental health of a person as well. We do know that they can be manifested in several direct, indirect, and overarching effects, and it may have a disproportionate effect among those who are already marginalized, like special population, like children, aged people, and women. This can occur alongside other physical, medical, social, and economic consequences of climate changes. The extreme climate change
Dr. Rahul, we have made you as a host. Could you just run through the slides from your side?
Sir, are you able to see the presentation?
I can see the slides, but you need to make it audible.
Just 1 second, sir. Just give me a second. So just give 1 minute. I'm just trying to put the slides over.
Yeah, that's okay. You can have a few minutes.
While we are waiting for the presentation, I have pasted the link for yesterday's quiz once again, requesting everyone if they can attempt it right now while we wait. So it would be a good utilization of time. The answers would be emailed to everyone or would be shared with everyone once all the quiz sessions are over. As some of the participants take quiz the next day, we are not able to share the answers right away. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dr. Renuka. A quite snippet, you have utilized the time that we were wanting it.
Let's just make better utilization of the time we have. And the technical glitches always happen even in in-person meetings. Sometimes we see the mic stops working or the presentation stops. So it's all part and parcel, be it online or be it offline training.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We'll look forward for the presentation. And yeah.
I'm just downloading it, sir. It's in my drive. So again, the same issue would happen if you play from the drive. The slides not being able to sync with the voice. So just give me 1 minute and I think it's almost about to be done.
Yeah, all right, Dr. Rahul. We just did it the same way, but unfortunately the slides were not moving, and we had this issue.
Just wanted to update you, Dr. Praveen. We have received response from 85 participants only for the quiz. So requesting everyone once again to please participate in the quiz.
We appreciate the participation of all the attendees, participants, and everybody who is attending the training. So that gives us the response of how the things that we have learned through this session. So I appreciate to answer all the quiz. I mean, to make an attempt in the quiz sessions. Dr. Rahul, are we through?
Yes, sir. Sir, it's done, sir. Just 1 second. I'm opening it.
Okay, fine.
It's audible, sir.
Yes, yes.
Not audible, Dr. Rahul. If you could run the slides on your own, will that be okay?
Now is it audible?
No, we cannot hear the
There is not much that we can do to prevent it
Now, sir?
right now. We need to focus on early warning and response systems. Nodal officers may play a in today's presentation, we will deal with the following topics.
Okay.
We'll start with climate change and mental health, research and evidence, interventions, and tasks for nodal officers and DMHP program officers. Coming to climate change and mental health scenario in India, although the attribution of mental health outcomes related to climate change remains debatable, but there are emerging evidence that say that all these extreme events may have adverse effect on mental health of a person as well. We do know that they can be manifested in several direct, indirect, and overarching effects, and it may have a disproportionate effect among those who are already marginalized, like special population, like children, aged people, and women. This can occur alongside other physical, medical, social, and economic consequences of climate changes. The extreme climate change can actually trigger mental illnesses like post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, anxiety, cause substance abuse, or may lead to suicidal ideation. It can also complicate the already existing grief, may lead to survivor's guilt, and may cause recovery fatigue. The impact of disaster is different at different stages. The acute impact of these disasters can lead to mental injury to those who have been immediately exposed. These sudden, unforeseen events like floods, hurricanes, and wildfires may especially have an adverse event in people, those who are undefended and helpless. Subacute impact can be seen in those who have indirectly witnessed the effect of climate change, may lead to anxiety related to uncertainty about survival of humans. A sense of being blocked, disorientation, and passivity has been seen in those people. While these could be the acute and subacute impacts, long-term outcomes have been seen as social and community effects, leading to outbreak into the form of violence, struggle over the limited resources, displacement and forced migration of people, the post-disaster adjustment problems, and chronic environmental stress. In various scientific studies, the effect has been substantiated, and it has been seen that people with mental illness are 3 times more likely to run the risk of death in case of heat waves. It is also seen that during the times of flood, which brings mourning, displacement, and psychosocial stress, as a direct outcome or as of its consequences, they are in turn risk factor for PTSD, depression, and anxiety. It is also seen that drought may again bring out the mental distress, anxiety, depression, and may even run the risk of suicide. Let's have a look how this incremental climate change is relevant to mental health per se. The rising temperature, rising sea levels, and episodic drought, and the changing agricultural conditions. These may lead to weakened infrastructure and gives rise to financial and relationship stress. That may in turn lead to adversities, which may lead the displacement of entire community, which will again increase the risk of violence, aggression, and relationship issues. This causes a sense of despair, hopelessness, and there is increase in rates of suicide or even rise in substance use has been observed. There is an emerging concept of eco-anxiety, also called climate distress or climate anxiety. It is basically an anxiety which is related to the global climate crisis and the threat of environmental disaster. The symptoms mostly manifest as anxiety symptoms like panic attack, insomnia, or obsessive thinking. These feeling of climate distress might be compounded by other daily stressors of negatively affecting overall mental health, which might potentially lead to increase in stress-related problems such as substance use disorders, anxiety disorders, and even depression. WHO has defined disaster as a severe disruption, ecological, psychosocial, which greatly exceeds the coping capacity of the affected community. Its characteristics are the sudden onset nature, unpredictability, uncontrollability, the huge magnitude of destruction, loss of human life, and suffering of human being, which greatly exceeds the coping capacity of the affected community. Over the years, a pattern has been recognized during and after the disaster, which is as follows. Within hours of occurrence of the disaster, there is a sense of surprise, perplexity, anxiety, fear, or one may feel numb and apathetic instead. After comes the period of heroism, which lasts up to 1 to 2 weeks, where there is a strong direct feeling of heroism. There is a feeling of solidarity in the community. A sense of optimism is there. After that comes the phase of honeymoon, which lasts up to 3 to 6 months, where in the sense of solidarity has reached its peak. There is an eagerness to rebuild. There is a feeling of sharing of common experience. As ordinary life seeps in, despite of the extraordinary circumstances, the phase of disillusionment sets in, which lasts up to 2 years. There is a feeling of withdrawal, a feeling of loneliness, anger, frustration, a disorganization in the community. The hostility is there, a sense of negativism, impulsivity, or even drug and alcohol abuse might be there. Then comes the phase of reconstruction, which lasts a lifetime, wherein a person accepts the losses, assess the things realistically, and look for alternatives to rebuild their lives. Let's look at the human response to disaster. Grief reactions. Grief reactions are normal reactions in abnormal situation, like in death or any case of loss. Normal grief resolves over a period of few months. While grief reaction is the main reaction that we have seen, but this is not the only reaction to a loss. One may also have something called survivor's guilt, which is the guilt of surviving a life-threatening disaster, while others that we love may not have. There might be a fear of losing control on emotions, fear of becoming mentally ill, an increase in risk of use of substance use, or an exacerbation in use of substance use. There is risk of increase in death wishes, suicidal ideations, or the grief, the normal reaction can be complicated and may lead to abnormal grief reactions, which may be delayed, absent, or even oscillating. As discussed earlier, there can be different reactions of survivor of disaster. These reactions, when prolonged, may result in mental health issues leading to loss of productivity, increase in substance use, marital discord, etc. In Indian context, an observation study was done on the topic psychiatric and medical disorders in the aftermath of the Uttarakhand disaster. It was seen that although the majority of treatment seekers were with physical health problems, those who sought for mental health issues were mostly having minor mental health disorders in the form of depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, and even substance use disorders was seen to be very prevalent in the community. In another report on psychosocial adversities experienced by children and adolescents, done post-Uttarakhand disaster in 2013, it was seen that about 66.7% of children or adolescents reported that one or the other psychosocial adversities are attributable to the disaster. Loss of shelter and loss of playing space were the social issues which were having a significant association between feelings such as anxiety, helplessness, insecurity, grief, and uncertainty, which are a marker of psychological distress. Another study which assessed the psychiatric morbidity in Tamil Nadu after the 2015 flood has reported that there is approx 45% of psychiatric morbidity post-disaster, among which 30% of people had post-traumatic stress disorder, 25% had anxiety, and 45% had developed depressive episode. In a study, assessing the major mental health problem post Gujarat earthquake, it was seen that the symptom of anxiety, depression, sleeplessness, and the avoidance of total contact with the outside world, along with the suicidal tendencies, were the major ways of manifestation of psychological problem. In this particular study, which was done after the super cyclone in Odisha, it was seen that majority of children had developed post-traumatic symptoms. Again, this study shows that post-traumatic stress disorder is the most commonly diagnosed psychological illness in flood-affected population in the Indian subcontinent. So all the studies have shown that there is significant psychiatric morbidity in the aftermath of an extreme weather event like disaster. Coming to the action plan for mental health problems, among the programs from National Mental Mission elements, we can utilize non-communicable disease control programs, reproductive, maternal, newborn, child and adolescent health programs, and Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karyakram programs to create awareness, early detection and coping skills. We can also use Human Resource Development Education Department to create awareness, climate mitigation responses, and to inculcate these in the existing curriculum of the school syllabus. We can create new employment opportunities and re-skill the people from these affected areas via Directorate of General Labour Welfare under the National Skill Development Programme. Next, we are going to discuss about interventions. Interventions can be at 3 levels: universal, selective, and indicated interventions. Since climate change is inevitable and global, everyone needs to be sensitized and prepared for these. The universal interventions are a part of promoting mental well-being for the whole population. Interventions shall focus on sensitization, knowledge, attitudes, practice, and positive health strategies. The selective intervention shall be a part of preventing occurrence of mental disorder among the at-risk population. It focuses on sensitization and building resilience in addition to positive health strategies and well-being. Indicated interventions are for those who are suspected to have mental disorders among the said population. The interventions include screening and brief intervention and referral based on stepped care module as and when needed, with special focus on common mental disorders, especially depression, anxiety, suicide, cases of violence, substance abuse, and psychological well-being. The most important aspect for any disaster is preparedness. An early warning response system will help with the same. This intervention includes surveillance and audit mechanism and developing climate change mental health observatories. The observatories shall be manned by the district mental health program team that shall deliver the essential services. A half-yearly audit on a list of indicators or parameters conducted by the program officer of DMHP shall be conducted. So where can we put out these observatories? We can start with establishing them in disaster-prone areas like coastal Odisha, West Bengal, Uttarakhand, in areas facing desertification and rising sea levels, and also in areas with existing mental health cohorts. It has been already established that disaster has disproportionate effect on vulnerable population like children, elderly, people with disability. So we need to have special focus in dealing with mental health issues in this population. The experience of children in disaster is different from those of adults. Suddenly, the familiar environment becomes scary. The loss of own belonging like toys, books, dresses, pets, and loved ones leads to a sense of threat, a sense of loss of well-being, a sense of insecurity in children. The impacts of these changes may manifest differently in different age groups. There could be different mediums that can be used to work with children after disaster, like using facial expression cards, thematic card, clay modeling, drawing, etc. There is a special role, a significant role of psychosocial caregiver in children, which is as listed here. Reference may be required for children in case of cases like conduct problem, overactivity, somatization, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and substance use. For example, in case of children, in case of elderly, paramedic, in case of elderly, for example, in case of children, in case of elderly, paramedic health staff can visit the old age homes in the allocated premises post-disaster, and again screen the people who already are a known case of mental illness or those who have lost their family members. We can screen them for worsening of medical illnesses, which includes checking their blood pressure and blood sugars. We can pay home visits and screen the concerned affected family members as well. And in the previous fashion that has been discussed, provide psychosocial support, liaise with authorities for financial support, refer for medical support when and if needed, and refer for treatment of mental illness if any. Reasons for elderly population to be affected more in case of disaster has been depicted here. Some of the ways to help them out are to keep a list of medications that may require, a link to access to healthcare, an emergency backup plan, as well as other points that have been mentioned here. Persons with disability have disproportionate effect on those who already have been disabled. It may also create a new generation of persons with disability. The consequences of disaster are different for those who already have a disability and those who have acquired disability during the disaster. The type of disability as per the Rights of Person with Disability Act 2016 has been listed here. The response that can be taken after disaster can broadly be divided into acute phase and reconstruction phase, which are mentioned herewith. Migrants and sexual minorities should also be given priority when planning for disaster management and response. Self-care can be really helpful in overwhelming situations. With family, we can try to modify our lifestyle, talk about things if we feel are necessary, to try to create a healthy environment, to try to focus on ourselves and have more time together. With colleagues, we can try to be there for each other by listening to each other's feeling, have a buddy system with co-worker, support others if they are down, and also take a break when required. Even for the caregivers, self-care is very important. They are also vulnerable and they need to take preventive action to be able to cope with their stress. Following things could be helpful with personal care. Things like keeping a diary of their activity experience, to perform physical activity, spare time for rest, listen to music, read books, or whatever they like to do, basically a time for their self. Practice relaxation techniques like meditation and breathing exercises, etc. could be very helpful. So, what would be the role of nodal officer in this? We can start with identifying the climate sensitive zones in the state, that is areas where repeated extreme weather events occur or there is an incremental climate changes that is occurring. We can identify and create linkages between existing
healthcare delivery facilities at primary, secondary, tertiary levels, which can help to further integrate and effectively utilize the facilities available at different levels. This will further strengthen the available stepped care network that we already have, especially from catchments in climate sensitive zones. So how can we utilize this stepped up care? A brief or early intervention can be done at the first contact, and referral to higher center can be made if required. Detection for mental health illnesses, consulting other physical ailments like trauma or non-communicable diseases, as this can be done alongside. And the screening should be done for common mental illnesses like depression, anxiety, and also suicide or self-harm. What can be done to sensitize and awareness in population? We need to identify personnel available for mental health interventions, both trained mental health professionals and those who can be trained for this. We also need to arrange training of trainers to achieve this. Training should focus on promoting positive mental health strategies, to promote stress reduction and yoga techniques, and to provide education on life skills, which includes dealing with anger, sadness, boredom, anxiety. The training should also include modules on psychological first aid. We should also learn how to deal with alcohol and substance misuse and to make oneself aware of psychological adaptation, to impart therapeutic skills training as to how to help others. Program officer of the DMHP shall conduct an audit half-yearly on the indicators, parameters to understand the following two major aims: patterns and trends of mental health in different climate sensitive zones and following climate events, the working of the stepped care network and sensitization effort. Following are the list of essential indicators or parameters and surveillance measures used in climate change and mental health. The number of human resources available at the observatory, availability of funds for climate change, number of training programs conducted for each category of human resources, the availability of infrastructure at the observatory, number of information, education, and communication activities performed, targeted interventions activities like life skill education, suicide prevention programs, counseling programs, availability of essential psychiatric drugs, exclusive vehicle hired for community activity and travel monitoring, display of the services, norms, or standards of the observatory, display of the rights of person with mental illness, display of the grievance redressal contact numbers, number of cases of long-standing, which is taken as more than 1 year duration, illnesses who had previously not been in contact with health services and now are in contact with services. Total number of cases seen in a month stratified by categories such as age, gender, or major diagnostic categories. Evaluation by the users of health services for the quality of care for a proper feedback. Number of planned and surprise reviews by DMHP teams and concurrent number of meetings of user and caregiver groups held at health facilities, the utilization of budget, what is the number of self-help group and advocacy initiatives launched, is there an increase in OPD registrations to show higher help-seeking behavior, the estimated coverage of care for mental disorders based on expected number of cases and the number identified, the type of intervention referred to each case, whether being medication or the psychosocial intervention, the number or the count of population of homeless mentally ill people who have accessed DMHP, number of other disadvantaged patients accessing. In addition to other parameters that has already been described, one can also access the number of persons from different economic status and gender who are diagnosed with and treated with mental illness, number of referrals to higher centers, number of patients with mental illness who have received continuing care services in form of daycare, home-based rehab, short-stay residential continuing care services, number of women attending observatory, then number of children who are receiving services, number of people with alcohol use disorders who are receiving services, those with substance use disorders who are receiving services, count of people who avail disability certification or disability certification allowance, the number of suicides, number of persons who have actually dropped out of care, and finally, number of elderly who have received care. Now, all these parameters will help in understanding and evaluating the services which are under the program and will help in feedback to constantly improve the services. We have learned that Indian subcontinent has frequent climate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rahul, for a brief presentation on mental health associated with climate change. And then now we would look forward for the questions or comments or any sort of remarks from the participants.
Sir, I think there is some question in the chat from Nitish Dogra, Dr. Nitish Dogra. So seasonal affective disorder is a known phenomenon in Western settings due to severe winters. What is the mental health effect of worsening summers? Sir, again, seasonal affective disorder is not very specific only to Western countries. Even in our country. So even as far as I know, the data says that at least 1 million people over the country has seasonal affective disorder, especially like you've said in winters. So there is not much robust data about the effect of mental health on worsening summers. But what we have seen over the period of time, or with our experience, is that mostly during the summers, the so-called mania, that is one phase of bipolar affective disorder called as mania, is something which gets exacerbated during summers. But again, it is not a very clear correlation between summer and mania, as it is very clear with seasonal affective disorder.
Thank you.
Rahul?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. Yeah, I'm Dr. Naveen. I am sorry I was able to log in only now. There is another question based on EWARS. Can we have pre-counseling of population? Will it help? Any responses to that, Rahul?
Sir, as it has been seen that early warning and response systems, if we have pre-counseling in terms of, especially in the climate sensitive zones or in the catchment areas which are prone to climatic changes, so I think it would not come out as a shock or a surprise for the people if there is some amount of pre-counseling done in terms of the impact of this disaster or the extreme climatic event on general conditions, so that they can cope better. So what we are looking at is maybe improving the resilience of this catchment. So definitely it would help if there is some sort of pre-counseling.
Also, I'd like to add that climate change and mental health is a very new area, so not much literature is there, research is there. In fact, now is the time to have some solid evidence regarding the relationship between climate change and mental health. As one way of conceptualizing is the climate change or sudden events can be viewed as some sort of a disaster. So of course, that kind of presentation you all have seen. And the mental health consequences will be nothing but disaster related mental health consequences, something like that. And some observations that we have done from our institute is that there may be inherent resilience in our population, because when we did a cursory kind of comparison in disaster affected areas, what is the mental health morbidity, and compared to that with disaster induced psychiatric problems, we found the morbidity to be very, very less in our population. So there are some factors we need to build upon them. We need to improve the resilience of our population. Maybe community living is one psychosocial factor, but we have to have more evidence for that. And we need to, that's what I would like to mention. We need to study. In that context, the surveillance project that is part of the MOU, I think that's very crucial from the mental health perspective. At least we will have clear answers to the relationship between climate change and mental health. At least if you do the pilot in 1 or 2 talukas or blocks or districts, then we will have enough information to expand it further. So that is what I'd like to add here. And there's another question: in any climate change and mental health data available in India? I don't think so. Rahul, any?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Again, since the definition of climate change has been is different. So in the data, it has been known, or it has been written as disaster mostly, and not this word climate change. So if we look for climate change and mental health data in India, we will not be able to find anything for research data. But if you look for disaster, like how it was seen in the presentation, I think most of the work is done by Dr. Naveen here, who has been to Uttarakhand, who's been a part of Uttarakhand floods, flash floods, and then cyclones in Orissa, and then recent Kerala floods and Karnataka floods. So I think sir will be able to actually give more insight into disaster related work for India.
Yeah, that's what, as I was saying, the adjustment disorders, the new onset adjustment disorders are the ones which we need to think about. The other mental health problem could be worsening or precipitation of pre-existing mental illnesses. That is another aspect. The other aspect that can happen is among those who are vulnerable, these climate change events can act as precipitating events. For a person, say for example, if anybody is vulnerable to anxiety, he may develop an anxiety disorder soon after he or she gets exposed to this particular climate change event as part of the disaster. As I was saying, from the preliminary research that we have done, morbidity is there, but it's very, very less when compared to that of the Western population. Some inherent factors are responsible for that. I think it's our duty now to just study what are those and build on those factors. So one other question is climate change, is it the only disaster? What about the daily slow change in climate and mental health? It's a very tough question according to me. We have no answer. The answer is I don't know, because it's just it's such a new area and a fascinating one at that. So being identified as one of the center of excellences, I think it's our obligation to come up with answers to these questions. Rahul, you want to answer that?
So one thing is, like, it is not only a disaster. We have been said about the incremental climate changes right now. How we have described in the PPT also and the presentation is about incremental climate changes, where the climate change over the period of time, maybe over the period of a couple of years or decades, there is still an effect on mental health. So, but like how the previous question was about relevant data in terms of having for climate change and mental health, it is a very new concept for the mental health itself, that climate change relationship with mental health. So we will not be able to find data. So what we have is for disaster related, because that is something which is significant which has happened, and there is some data about it, but nobody has looked into it. Like Dr. Naveen was saying, it is now the time for us to actually build on this and get more data. Maybe in a couple of years we will be able to actually give up with a clear definition of what is incremental climate change in terms of mental health in our country.
One more question is there, Rahul. I think we had missed it previously. Is there a climatic effect on seizure disordered patients? What is the action plan?
Sir, with regards to that, again, one seizure we have not included, but to answer the question, there is no direct effect as we can say, but indirectly, since the climate change and extreme weather events will lead to some stress, also in terms of decreased sleep, okay, and fever and other issues, which will in turn lead to seizure related disorders, especially if it's a fever or vector-borne diseases, then they decreases seizure threshold and leading to more frequent episodes of seizures. So again, for that, the point would be to recognize this. So whenever somebody comes to us from a disaster-prone area or a climate change area, screening them for all these things. So whether it's a known case of seizure disorder, and then being ready for it in terms of anticipating is something which we can incorporate in the action plan for active screening and trying to avoid further episode of seizure.
Yeah, also there's an entity called as hot water epilepsy. When particularly in children, it is known that sudden exposure to hot water, particularly during taking, can precipitate a seizure. Apart from that, I'm afraid I don't think there is much information. We are sorry about it, and let's see. I mean, if any information is there, we'll be happy to share. We'll work on it and get back to the August group.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naveen and Dr. Rahul.
So, Dr. Naveen, can I interject for a minute here, please? Dr. Praveen, if you allow.
Yeah,
please.
Yes, yeah.
Dr. Praveen, there was this question about what about daily impacts of climate change. In the beginning of the presentation, Dr. Punita discussed about climate anxiety or eco-anxiety. That is also one of the known mental health impact of the daily climate change, where people, and especially young people, are much worried about what is going to happen to their future, what is going to happen to their children because of climate impact. So that is one documented and known new impact of climate change on mental health. Apart from that, this what we say, like there are climate impacts known as shock and the climate impact known as waves, which are slowly. So like a drought is a disaster, but which is not visible on daily basis. So these are all the also the kind of impacts, climate impacts which lead to mental health disorders. So not, as Dr. Anupama rightly pointed out in her question, that some disasters are seen and some disasters are not seen. Loss of livelihood is a disaster which is not seen, but it has a great repercussion on person's mental well-being. So it is, some disasters would have direct impact and some would have indirect impact on the longer run. Thanks, Dr. Naveen. You can add, I see you wanted to add something.
Yeah. No, see, in that sense, yes, thanks, Dr. Renuka. In that sense, I think mental health is something which gets affected by many things, and climate change in itself is a very huge thing. And so intuitively speaking, we could expect a definitive relationship between climate change as defined very broadly, because disasters also is part of climate change. Whatever natural disasters you take, and of course, so there's nothing we can keep out of the purview of mental health, in one sense. I think now we should use the opportunity and try to come up with more definitive answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Naveen and Dr. Rahul, showing us the insights of mental health. And we do also, keep associated with the mutual MOUs, wherein which we will be developing SOPs, action plans, training modules, and training future trainings, surveillance, and etc. So I think this would give us the knowledge and awareness regarding the mental health in few days, a few months, So I think probably this can be taken up by the state nodal officers and the district nodal officers over there, and then we can implement it across the country.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And then we would move on to the next next presentation. I would like to see Dr. Alok. I think probably we missed him in between, and then hope things are great or good at his end, so that we can give him an opportunity to complete the presentation. Dr. Alok, please.
Hello. Yes. So I hope this time it will be clear. Although I am still getting some disturbance, probably it is because of our network, I think. Because as I was hearing others' presentation, sometimes I was still getting some problem. So,
Dr. Alok,
yes.
we would be just moving on to the next presentation.
Okay.
So I think so if it persists till 1 hour, I think so probably if the connectivity is good after half an hour or half an hour or 1 hour, we'll get back to you and then we'll continue your presentation. So we would be doing the next presentation by from NIN.
Okay. Okay.
Dr.
Okay.
Lakshmaya.
Yeah. Because still I am having some problem.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay.
Is it audible, my voice?
Yes, sir. Please continue, sir. We can see you.
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah. Is it my slides are visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Right. Okay, so today I'm going to just talk about the nutrition scenario in India, and some few minutes I can also spend on climate change and the nutritional status of vulnerable population. And we have conducted extensive studies during even drought and other even flood situations in the throughout the country. Here, this is all basic things, and everybody might be aware that what is the health and what is the nutrition status. So then, why significance of nutrition? Why should we know about? Why should we learn about nutrition? And the nutrition influence the normal growth and development and various physiological functions. And epidemiological data reveals strong association between undernutrition and morbidity and mortality, because wherever morbidity and mortality is high, the undernutrition is also high. So the chronic degenerative disorders, such as some of the even both we are discussing malnutrition, and malnutrition covers overnutrition as well as undernutrition. So, so even overweight obesity is also associated with increased risk of developing cancer of the breast and colon. And then another important thing is undernutrition in early childhood is associated with chronic degenerative disorders in later life, as per David Barker's hypothesis. So these are what is malnutrition? Malnutrition is a pathological state, results from ingestion of one or more nutrients, either in excess or deficient in quantities over a period of time because of several environmental effects. So who are vulnerable in this gamut is the infants and young children and adolescent girls, pregnant and lactating women, elderly, and socio-economically deprived groups, that is scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and urban slum communities. So these are the actual major groups. So these are the health and nutrition challenges in India. We are facing triple burden of disease. Everyone might be aware of that. The major one is protein energy malnutrition, PEM. And in this PEM, clinical forms of PEM, kwashiorkor and marasmus, and subclinical forms of PEM, underweight and stunting, wasting, and low birth weight, and chronic energy deficiency, usually seen in adult people. So second one is micronutrient deficiencies. This is vitamin A deficiency, iron deficiency anemia, iodine deficiency disorders, zinc deficiency disorders. So in our country, the micronutrient deficiency is very rampant because the major problem is iron deficiency anemia. Almost 50 to 70% of these vulnerable groups are suffering from anemia. So why we are knowing about all these things? Because any change, because existing normal condition itself, there is a lot of deficiency of these nutrients. If climate change is there, that further aggravate these deficiencies. So that's why we should also know all these deficiencies and how these can act with environmental conditions. So diet-related chronic non-communicable diseases, this is the other side of the coin. Other side of the coin is overnutrition. So that will also lead to overweight, obesity, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, then cardiovascular diseases, and some GIT, gastrointestinal cancers also related to a diet. So then protein allergen malnutrition, especially kwashiorkor and marasmus. So the severe protein calorie malnutrition can lead to two types of nutritional disorders, that is kwashiorkor and marasmus. Mild or moderate degrees of malnutrition in children may not be so easily diagnosed. Such children show growth retardation to varying degrees. The subclinical malnutrition, usually by measurement only we can know the subclinical subclinical undernutrition. So this is because of feeding adequate amounts of diets based on low cost and locally available foodstuffs such as cereals, pulses, groundnuts can help to prevent ill effects of underfeeding. So these some of the statistics you can see. This is based on NNMB. So the NIN and NNMB used to conduct a periodical surveys in the different population groups, tribal, rural, and urban population. So there is the prevalence is very, very high among urban tribal population compared to urban population, even rural population. You can see underweight, stunting, and wasting. Underweight, underweight is a weight for age. You might be knowing the definition, and the stunting is a height for age, and wasting is a weight for height. So these are the indicators for nutrition assessment, especially among children. So here time trends you can see. So the time trends, even though it is reducing over a period of time, but still there is a significant problem in India compared to other developing countries. So here, this is also prevalence of undernutrition among infants by age. You can see the age increases, the undernutrition also increasing. At birth, the prevalence of underweight or stunting and wasting is around 10 to 20%, but after reaching 1 year, it is increasing to 40% of undernutrition, and it is continuing and increasing if age is increasing. So that's why the intervention, wherever the intervention is, we have to take is here, even less than 1 year, we have to focus. So this is the opportunity to act here and to prevent the further increase of undernutrition. So this is why it is happening. This is a faulty IYCF practices, infant and young child feeding practices, and even Lancet publications also say that early initiation of breastfeeding is prevent 22% of infant mortality. Here, the early initiation of breastfeeding is only around 1/3 of the children or 1/3 of the mother could able to do. And exclusive breastfeeding up to 6 months, only breastfeed should be given, but only less than 50% of mothers only can give this exclusive breastfeeding. So here, initiation of complementary feeding should be given immediately after 6 months, but that also only 2/3 of mothers only could give initiation of complementary feeding. So because of these faulty practices, the child is the undernutrition is increasing by becoming a child, by child reaching 1 year. So if you see the other nutritional deficiency, you can see iron deficiency, anemia, folic acid deficiency, neural tube defects, and then vitamin A deficiency. There is a lot of here Bittard spots and corneal scar, and sometimes even it leads to xerophthalmia and other conditions. Here, iodine deficiency disorders also significant in some parts of the country, and then zinc deficiency is as well as it is also hampered the growth of the child. So B12 deficiency is also a very significant problem because B12, folic acid, and iron, this all leads to anemia. So the prevalence of anemia is already discussed. With the prevalence of anemia is very, very high in our country. Almost up to 2/3 of the population is suffering from anemia. And previously we thought that the major cause is only iron deficiency anemia. But now the reports are saying that it is also significant contribution also given by the B12 deficiency. And recently we have conducted mapping of B12 in several states, and we found that almost 25 to 40% people, 40% of people are suffering from B12 deficiency also. Now, so this we are going to submit this report, and based on this report, now government is also planning to include the B12 also for intervention program. So especially the interventions for the first 1,000 days is also very, very important, because the whatever the just previous slides also we explained that the undernutrition is happening because of the pregnant women. So the maternal malnutrition is also very important, and if the pregnant woman is undernourished, the offspring of the child also become undernourished, and sometimes the child is intrauterine growth retardation also will be there. So based on that, so we have to start the care even during pregnancy and after pregnancy, 2 years of the child age. So different aspects we can cover up to 2 years of the child. So then only the child become healthy and we can get the future problems. So the current burden of malnutrition among children and adults in India, you can see this study recently conducted, the CNNS, the Comprehensive National Nutrition Survey. Based on Comprehensive National Nutrition Survey was conducted less than 19 years in adolescents, including adolescents, and that shows that the stunting in children is almost 46 million children are suffering from stunting. So total in the globally 155 million children suffering globally, but India alone contributing almost 1/3 of the children for this problem. And diabetes in adults also 72%, 72 million people are suffering from diabetes, and 166 million people are suffering from overweight obesity in India. And majorly the 447 million people are suffering from anemia. So especially pregnant, lactating women, children, adolescents, and adolescent girls contribute this. So why we are worried about this nutrition status of the children, especially under 5 years? You can see that directly or indirectly, this 54% of deaths is caused by undernutrition. And the relationship, 10-15 minutes. So the relationship between health and nutrition, and good nutrition is the key to leading healthy lifestyle. And eating a balanced diet is an important part of good health, and nutrition plays a major role in promoting good health. So diets full of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and lean meats have proven health benefits like lowering blood pressure, improving glucose control in diabetes, weight loss, improving arthritis, reducing the risk of some cancers and cardiovascular events. So here and this you can see what are the determinants of nutritional status. You can see, so it is a multifactorial in nature, especially you can see agroclimatic factors, food production, land ownership, type of land, rainfall, and population and family size, urbanization, then especially religion, community, income, and especially these are the disasters. You can see disasters influence on household food security and availability of the foods, and also physiological factors, pregnancy, lactation, and socio-cultural taboos also very important for nutrition status, and illiteracy, ignorance, and taboos. Environmental factors, especially sanitation, wash programs, and personal hygiene, safe drinking water. And recently we have done wash criteria, and then we have seen nutrition status. Lot of improvement in wash program, and there is a significant impact on nutrition status also we observed. Then other pathological conditions like infections and diarrhea, respiratory infections, malaria, and others, infestations, hookworm infestation, roundworm, giardiasis, all these factors directly or indirectly affect on health as well as household food security, and household food insecurity leads to nutritional status or undernutrition. So we have to address all these factors. So why the children are affecting? You can see that this is adapted by UNICEF conceptual work. So undernutrition, short-term consequences and long-term consequences, especially maternal and child undernutrition. And this inadequate, the major cause is inadequate dietary intake and leading to morbidity. These are immediate causes, and these are the basic causes. And basic causes, especially financial, human, physical, social, and natural reasons. You can say socio and economical, political context also influence the nutrition status of the population, and especially mother and children. And just now we talked about the Barker's hypothesis, and the Barker's hypothesis, if the mother, pregnant woman is suffer nutritionally, and the intrauterine growth retardation of the infant also occur, and that will lead to the early onset of this non-communicable diseases. That's why we are seeing this is it is a very complex mechanism of how it is happening, fetal genetics and then intrauterine environment that ultimately lead to dyslipidemia, diabetic mellitus, and this is non-alcohol fatty liver disease and hypertension. So these are because of IUGR, intrauterine growth retardation leads to these non-communicable diseases and chronic diseases. So this is also very important because the reason is the food intake, inadequate food intake and unhealthy food intake. It is happening. And in ancient Greek, Hippocrates, the father of medicine, 400 BC, wrote, "Let the food be the medicine, and thy medicine be the food." So this is very important because we have to consume food as a medicine, and otherwise the medicine we have to eat as a food. So that we have already seen in some cases. And this is also regardless of who father of the disease is, surely its mother is improper diet. This is also very applicable in the present conditions because a high increase of non-communicable diseases or NCDs. And these are all influenced, diet is influenced by environment, and again the environment is influenced by climate change. Because of that we are discussing here. And this is also one thing, also this slide also very important, and Asian Indian genes are loaded guns and trigger is a bad lifestyle. So this is also very important because healthy diet and availability of healthy diet is also very important in this case. And some of the studies we carried out through NNMB, National Nutrition Monitoring Bureau, diet and nutrition status, rural population, urban population, tribal population. If you see the food intake, the cereals, pulses, green leafy vegetables is all dependent on green leafy vegetable, usually depend on seasonal and environmental conditions, and the availability also a question, and the storage facility is also a question, and otherwise also the consumption is very, very grossly deficient, you can say. So the milk and milk products, even though we are number one in milk and milk products, but the consumption levels are very less, and again these fats and oils, especially among children, is very less. But so this is also very reverse in case of adults, and adult consumption is very high compared to children consumption. This is 1 to 3 years. If they eat that kind of diet, what are the nutrients they get? And you can see the vitamin A deficiency is very, very high. Again, iron deficiency, calcium deficiency, riboflavin deficiency, vitamin C deficiency. So more or less boys or girls, the deficiency is very similar. And you can see the average foodstuffs because this is if you take a reference man or reference woman, you can take here over a period of time, the consumption of cereals is coming down, and pulses almost there is no change, but little improvement is seen in the green leafy vegetables and other vegetables, and more or less same. So roots and tubers and milk products also there is no improvement, and fats and oils there is an improvement, and sugar and jaggery is also a static. So the nutrient intake, you can see again the iron deficiency is very high in these diets for adult diets. But some of the nutrients they are meeting, and especially vitamin A, riboflavin, these three nutrients are deficient among this adult population. And this another important thing is now we are recommending as a healthy diet the millet consumption. You can see the millet consumption there is a drastic reduction over a period of the consumption of millets. The rural population, especially those tribal population, the consumption levels are coming down, and now the trend is the urban population is increasing the consumption. It is a reverse trend. Once upon a time, it is a poor man's diet, but now it becomes a rich man's diet. So now this even government is also promoting, and Ministry of Agriculture also promoting for production as well as distribution of millets and consumption of millets. And if you see the micronutrient deficiencies, especially the vitamin A, we have seen the dietary intakes are very, very poor. And the bitter spots, one of the objective sign of vitamin A deficiency, in some of the states, the prevalence is very, very high. Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and even Karnataka, West Bengal, you can see. So this was also indicates that these are the deficiency signs, mild vitamin A deficiency, severe vitamin A deficiency signs. This will indirectly or directly it leads to increase the morbidity, mortality, and growth retardation because of vitamin A deficiency. So this is just an objective sign of bitter spot. You can see. So this is a triangle shape raised surface from the temporal angle of the eye. So you can see. So this is because of vitamin A. Chronic vitamin A deficiency leads to this kind of bitter spots. And these are the prevalence of bitter spots. Here, what is the importance of this? Because if the prevalence is more than 0.5% of bitter spots, so that area is a public health significance of vitamin A deficiency. So there should be we have to start a special intervention programs in that geographical area. And here, if you see this slide, the consumption, the blood vitamin A, you can see blood vitamin A levels less than 20 micrograms per deciliter is almost very, very high. The prevalence is very high. Almost 62% of children are not getting vitamin A, not getting vitamin A, more 20 grams and above. Here you can see. So why it is happening? If you see the dietary intake is very deficient, you can say almost 90 to 80, 70% of population, the children are deficient of their dietary intake of vitamin A. And we have a national program, massive dose of vitamin A program, but there is a deficit, but the coverage is very poor. You can see overall only 50% people are receiving either 1 or 2 doses of vitamin A, and two doses are only just 25%, 1/4 of people are receiving from 2 doses. So that's why the program, even though the program is there, and the program coverage is also very less. So this is again iron deficiency anemia. You can see the causes and consequences. You all know about this anemia, because we have to immediate now. In a Anemia Mukt Bharat program, Government of India started the screen and treat. Immediately you have to screen and treat program that is experimentally going on some of the districts, and that maybe come up in every district, and then only the anemia levels can be reduced. So this is the definition of anemia, hemoglobin levels, how we define different age groups and different cutoffs are there. If the hemoglobin level this many grams per deciliter is less than these levels, we can call it as a anemic persons. So this prevalence of anemia, age and gender, physiological groups, and you can see all even 1 to 5 years children, and 12 to 14 years children, and 15 to 17 years adolescent girls, pregnant women, lactating women, NPNL women, and men. So the normals are this much only 30% to 45%, even 55%, even 55% of men also suffering from anemia. So this slide indicates the anemia is very high, and iron density to meet RDA. So whatever we are consuming, the density of the iron in that food is very less. Actually, we require 17.5. What we are eating in the 7.2. And here even lactating women also we have to 12.4% density should be there. But what we are diet contains only 7.2, and here 1 to 3 years also 7.3. Because of the diet itself contain a less iron, So then the magnitude of the problem is very high. So these are all even folic acid. Similarly, just like iron, even folic acid deficiency, the density is very, very less in our food. So here even IDD prevalence, iodine deficiency disorders, because this is also related to rainfall and agriculture, and depending upon the content of the iodine in the soil and foods. So this is also a significant problem in most of the states, and you can see the prevalence of anemia and northern states, northeastern, eastern, and these are the regions we have surveyed. The previous survey, this was done in 1985, and this was done 2003. Because of salt iodization, there is a significant reduction in the prevalence of IDD, the iodine deficiency disorders, but in eastern regions still persists the problem. And these are some examinators. Keratinism nowadays it is rare, but still some of the places we can see this kind of thing. This is a neurokeratinism. Here, the body length is not affected, but this is a neurological keratinism, you can say. So this will open. Percent of households consuming salt having adequate amount, more than 15 ppm of iodine. In every household salt intake, if you examine the salt intake, the salt should contain at least more than 15 ppm of iodine in that salt. So that is also only 1/3 of the households, the salt iodization is adequate. And here again, the adults, the nutrition status of you take adult, the chronic CED, chronic energy deficiency is also very high, and it is a tribal, rural, and urban population. Even the urban population is 14%, but in a tribal population, it is very high. And at the same time, the overweight obesity is also increasing very high among urban population. And even tribal population also, at least 3% of people are suffering from overweight obesity. The same thing we have seen in women also. In women, the overweight obesity is very high compared to men. So these are all the time trends you can see. Even though it is decreasing CED and increasing overweight obesity among men and women, you can see here time trends, and this is also a worrisome. Why should we be worried about the BMI? And if the BMI is less, is a risk, and if a BMI is high, is also a risk, because the cardiovascular risk here shown in this figure, there is a J-shaped curve, you can see. So we have to maintain our height and weight here in this region. BMI we have to maintain in this 18.5 to 25 BMI. Then only the health risk will be covered. So central obesity and insulin resistance, the South Asian susceptibility, you can say. Lot of overweight obesity, and that overweight obesity also leads to increased prevalence of diabetes. And even Asian Indians are prone to develop a diabetes, you can see easily. The diabetes increasing very straight line with the increase of waist and hip ratio. At the same time, European, the slope is very less, and here for Indians and South Asians, slope is very straight.
Excuse me, Doctor.
So that's why,
Lakshmi,
yeah,
you have to wind up. Excuse me, Dr. Lakshmi, you have to wind up in the next 5 minutes, because we have other speaker also. Just wind up in the next 5 minutes. Thank you.
Right. So these are all nutritional problems, you can see, and this already submitted. And now we will come to the other part. Yeah, this is the impact of drought due to climate of nutritional status of population. We have done Rajasthan, Gujarat, and most of the states. So in 9 states we have submitted this report, and I am presenting one of the states. You can see drought is a condition of moisture deficit and sufficient to have an adverse effect on vegetation and animals and man over a period of time. So the monsoon related calamities such as drought and floods disturb pattern of life, especially agrarian population in India. So recurrent droughts result in primary and scarcity of fodder and drinking water, and in addition to health hazards associated with poor environmental hygiene and sanitation. So this is a conceptual framework, how this will affect the food intake and food security, and as well as how it leads to death. So at a household level, food security is defined as access to food that is adequate in terms of quality, quantity, safety, and it should be available throughout the time. A household achieves nutrition security when it has secure access to food, coupled with a sanitary environment, adequate health services, and knowledgeable care to ensure a healthy life for household members. And this already previous speakers also mentioned here, and this is that during earlier episodes of drought, average calorie consumption in affected areas in Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Maharashtra was observed to be ranging from 1100 to 1400 kilocalories per day, a level barely sufficient to meet the basic needs. You can see here. So this is the deficit. It is some of the percent of families consumed even less than 500 kilocalories per capita. In some families, that is, it is almost a starvation diet during the drought. So here, prevalence of clinical signs. This clinical signs. So clinical signs means in the deficiency of nutritional deficiency is also increased. We have carried out Bihar and Maharashtra. These three states you can see. Maharashtra is normal. It is 0.01. You can see this increased observation. You can see here. And here, this we have done a study on request of Ministry of Agriculture during the drought. And this is especially Rajasthan. You can see some of the pictures very due to scarcity of water here and the carcasses and around these areas you can see. But there was a severe drought and even water also, scarcity of water, and whatever this bathing water also they used to save, and this water also used to some other purposes. And average household consumption of foodstuffs you can during drought, and you can see here during drought and 2001, and this is another one, and this is a normal situation. How it is different from a drought to non-drought. So there was a significant reduction in the amount of consumption during drought period in both nutrients and as well as foodstuffs, because the lack of time, I'm not explaining detail, but this is the situation. Some of this marasmic child. So these are the clinical signs and symptoms, and you can see the food security status. So how the cereals and millets and other the foodstuffs you can see less than normal, and no change. What is the percentage? And change 25% change in their quantity, 50% change in their quantity, 75% change in the quantity. How many households they have done this kind of coping mechanisms during drought, especially regarding the nutrition status. These are the actually what coping strategy they use, the use of food stocks and savings. This many percent, 22% of households, whatever we surveyed, and consumption of low-cost foods also 10% of family they used this, and borrow cash and food from others. This is almost 50% families they borrowed cash and obtained government and NGOs assistance and reduce food consumption. This is also a very drastic situation. The consumption itself they voluntarily reduced because of lack of food. And migration, 6% family migrated, and selling household assets 3.3%, and others 53.5%, you can see. So that ends my talk. So then now I am happy to answer any queries. Thank you for giving this opportunity.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshmaya, for giving us in detail not only about nutrition, micronutrient deficiency, and also with reference to climate change. I think I believe has a lot of data already done field study with reference to effect of drought on human diet patterns, and maybe in future in the current climate disasters happening in this year even. Maybe it can give you more further opportunities for further studies. Thank you. Any question in this area?
So there's one question, like I can again give summary of couple of questions together. So the participants want to know, can we definitely link nutritional deficiency with climate change? as nutritional deficiency has been seen and observed in Indians and other people for long time. How can we say nutritional deficiency will be caused because of climate change?
That's what we have, even though it is a old data, but we have also shown that what is the food intake during drought and what is the food intake in the non-drought situation. Non-drought situation also there is a deficiency. But during the drought, during the scarcity, during the climate change, the consumption levels is still further go down. So that is the measures we can take, and we have the baseline data during normal period, and we are also comparing with during the drought period. So that make out the what is the difference between drought and non-drought period consumption. As you rightly said that even normal period also some of the micronutrient deficiencies are very high. So that now fortification strategy is also going on. So probably we can reduce some of the micronutrient deficiency because of successful fortification with the different nutrients. And FSSA also working on that guidelines, fortification guidelines, and recently draft guidelines also released. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. A lot of appreciation from the participants. They found the presentation very informative. Thank you, sir, for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And we'll be moving on to the next presentation. That's on Hilly and Mountainous region climate-sensitive diseases by Nigrims Shillong. I think so. The presentation would be done by Dr. Stapala. We welcome Dr. Stapala for the online training session, and then a few words from Dr. Stapala.
Thank you, sir. So good evening to all the panelists and to all the participants. So I didn't want to take much time here. I know the time is running fast, but we also not to that extent expert in this field of hill and climate mountainous region. So in this presentation, we have made a presentation. We try to highlight what the health system can adapt to this climate change, especially in the hills and mountainous regions. So I know it's very preliminary, but I want to input from all the participants, maybe the panelists also. We can improve on how the health system can adapt to this climate change, especially in hilly and mountainous regions. As we know that recently also lots of adaptation is required, especially in Himachal. We have this landslide, how we can mitigate these things. So we have this recorded presentation. So you can run the presentation, or I can go live also, which I can run it through in a quick time.
If it is readily available, then you can run it on your own side, or yeah, you can do it on your own side, Dr. Stapala.
Yeah, I think better since we are live, so I can.
Yeah, because
if you can see, I am sharing the slide, you can use. So I think the slide is sharing. I think you can see it in a few seconds. So I hope you can see the slide.
Yes, now it's visible.
Yeah, so I think I can go because I don't want to take much time also. As I told you that see climate sensitive health problem in the Indian hilly and mountainous region and its adaptation plan in the health sector. So Nigrim has been is a center of excellence for this area under the NPCCHH program. So as we all know that climate change has a great impact for the hilly and the mountainous region, and this even with a small trigger in climate change, the impact we can visibly see it. So that's what we need to have a multi-sectoral engagement. So how to tackle this climate change in the hilly and mountainous region? So we see actually these are the area which are mostly including in the hilly and mountainous region. There are different parts of the country also. We have some hilly and mountainous region, but basically broadly it is dealing with this Himalayan belt. So as I shown you, 8 northeastern states plus other states and union territories. So we see that this usually the hilly and the mountainous region are very vulnerable. Even the government also support financially and also infrastructure wise. That's why the scheme, the government always try to give us 90% central government and 10% state government share, because it's very difficult terrain and very hard to reach areas for all other program also. Why it is vulnerable? Because people here in the hilly and mountainous are, as compared to other parts of the country, are low socio-economic status, and universal healthcare is a challenge for them, and they are more prone for natural disasters. So as we see that climate change, it has a number of potential risks in the ecosystem. So actually it is sensitive, as I already told you. So ultimately when there is climate change, so disaster happens, and ultimately it impacts on the health of the people, mainly in injuries, morbidity, and even mortality. That's what I told you. Recently you have seen that landslide reported some part of northeastern state also, and Himachal Pradesh also. It is lead to loss of life, injuries, and even death. So do climate change in the hilly, I think some part is already covered under nutrition part also. Even the climate change impact on the hilly and mountainous region. So it has an impact on the agricultural activities, which ultimately has a link for the malnutrition and other health consequences, which I'm not going to just touch it because already covered nutrition is a separate field. And usually the migration of people to sustain their income due to seasonal variation of agricultural activities is difficult to sustain them economically. So they have to do this migration from the hilly to other part of the to sustain their income. So these are the potential disaster in the hilly and mountainous region. So we have the extreme weather like thunderstorm, lightning. So landslide is a common both in the northeastern state and the Himalayan and in other part of the mountainous region. Avalanche is there in Jammu and Kashmir and Himachal Pradesh. Cloudburst, flash flood. Do we have flood in Assam? Part of Assam also flood is there. But this flash flood in Uttarakhand is frequently it is happening recently also. So this extreme weather condition, cold wave, or sometimes even forest fires, this will have an impact on the health of the people in the region. So there is a study to map the climate change vulnerability map. So you can see that these are the red, no? Are the who are based on the density of the color, it is the more risk for, more vulnerable for this climate change. So you can see that it's highest in the mountainous, in the Himalayan belt. So that's why we have to do this mapping of vulnerable areas which are prone to many diseases. As we know that vulnerability is defined as to which degree the individual and system are susceptible to and able to cope to effect of climate change. So many a time we see that we in the hilly and mountainous region are having less resources or infrastructure to cope with the with any disaster whenever it's happening. So it's very vulnerable to various diseases, mainly infectious disease, and also to weather condition of temperature and other thing. So there's a study by climate vulnerability assessment was done for the Indian Himalayan region in 2019, IHCAP. So there's one report. So I just want to share you with this report. Based on what criteria they are assessing the vulnerability index of the hilly and mountainous region. So the first criteria is socio-economic and demographic status. And the second is sensitivity of agriculture production. Third one is forest dependent livelihood. Usually in the hilly and mountainous region, we depend on the forest. And the fourth one is access to information, service and infrastructure. So based on these four broad indicators, so they map how vulnerable is the hilly and the mountainous region in our country. So as I told you, this is the demographic part. I'll not go detail about it. So these are the, as I already shown in the previous slide also. So this vulnerability index, they have shown that if you see the red color, that is Assam, is having the maximum vulnerability index, followed by the orange, Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, West Bengal, Manipur, Meghalaya, and the least vulnerability is Uttarakhand and Arunachal Pradesh. So this is the index. So one is like maximum vulnerability. So we see Assam and Mizoram is almost in the 70%. But this is, as I told you, this is a risk, just a risk to cope with the vulnerability. It all depends on the socio-demographic profile, livelihood of people, how do they depend on the forest livelihood. So based on those factors, do Uttarakhand, Sikkim has the least risk? It doesn't mean that they are having no risk. The only thing is they can cope better when there is a any disaster happening, maybe based on the other factors, so they can cope it maybe in a better way. So that's why the risk assessment is shown them as these are relatively low. Doesn't mean there is no risk. So you know the meaning of relatively low. Doesn't mean there is no risk. So they still have risk of 42%. So like for Assam is the highest vulnerability based on the, because as I told you, this is on the deforestation, low per capita income, lack of alternative income. So these are indirectly related to climate change. The only thing is when climate change impact us, we have less resources to cope with it, because we are more vulnerable in these indicators, because we have high dependence on agriculture and lack of alternative source of livelihood. So increased vulnerability of the state. So this is one factor for Assam. And not all are part of Assam also. In some district of Dhubri, Lakhimpur, Sonitpur, I'll not go all of the district, just for example. So we have like Meghalaya also are in the medium risk. So, but among all the district, West Khasi Hills, part of Meghalaya is having the most vulnerable among all the district in the state of Meghalaya, followed by other districts. So based on those 4 indicators. So what these are like mainly theoretical, the pathways for weather to affect health. So all of you notice it purely theoretical that we have taken from the WHO. What are the pathways for the weather to affect the health? So usually the climate change happen. When the climate change is there, it affects the environment. Okay, so the environment will impact on the social condition of the people. Direct exposure in terms of heat, cold. Indirect exposure like change in the food quality, agriculture, okay, vector-borne disease, ecosystem, disrupt in social disruption. So all these factors, and also maybe the health system condition is not so strong in the hilly and mountainous region. So based on the exposure, the risk, and how the health system can cope with those risks, and that lead to health impacts for the people. So we have to modify this influence of the climate, how in spite of having the risks, how we can mitigate those risks, how we can lower this risk, how we can lower the impact of climate change on the health of people in the hilly and mountainous region. So these will be taken from WHO. So as I tell you, this also is almost same, like what is the link between the climate change and health. So it is similar. This is as given by Pat et al. That climate change lead to human exposure, maybe contamination pathways, dynamic of disease transmission, agriculture dynamics, socio-economic dynamics of people. As I told you, that people may migrate from hilly to other areas. So it has an impact. So directly there is some impact on the infectious disease, as today we already had a presentation of the vector-borne disease in detail. So I will just go through it a little bit only, that it will increase to some incident of vector-borne disease in previously unreported mountainous region. So we have like in the northeast, also some part is never affected by the vector-borne disease, but newly affected by the vector-borne disease in different parts of the country. So even for waterborne disease also are likely to increase in some part, maybe because of the changing the pattern of the climate change with more flooding in some areas. So the impact on waterborne disease, that's what. So hilly and climatic mountainous region are prone for the waterborne disease because sometimes this now practically it is coming down. It is not so much increasing the waterborne disease. Not like in olden days we have so many cholera outbreak, dysentery. Nowadays it is less, but there is some area that is increasing maybe because of the contamination and because of the migration of people into the higher part of the hills, maybe the contamination of the water bodies. So that way maybe is a factor for contamination of what rivers and all, maybe with to waterborne disease. So just to share a few examples from what is the impact of vector-borne disease in the hilly areas. So some studies have been done from Nepal, like the outbreak of Kala Ajar and Japanese encephalitis. They have been linked to climate change. Okay, in a study by Redmi et al. 2006. So it's affecting the new areas of the hill area. There also been a concern for even India also about the changing pattern of some of these diseases. I'll just show you some example. Like a vector for falciparum malaria, for transmitting malaria, is reported to be spreading to higher altitudes of the Himalayas. This has been done a study by Bacharia et al. So there's a report possible upward transmission of even leishmaniasis vector beyond 600 meter in Garhwal and Himachal Pradesh in India also. These are just reported, few examples to say that is it changed with the altitude also, the disease, where it was previously not endemic, but now it is increasing in some part of Garhwal and Himachal Pradesh. Also, like Aedes aegypti, have been found the vector for dengue. It has been recorded in the Kumaon Hills at the elevation higher than previously reported. So this is a study which has been done long back in 1999, but it's good to know the history. That's okay. Vector also do change with altitude, maybe with the movement of the people or with deforestation. In detail, we have to see this dynamics of the vector-borne disease. So just an example for in our state, Meghalaya also. Japanese encephalitis was not much reported before 2009, 2010, but in 2009-10, it started, the Japanese encephalitis was reported and the case were start increasing. But really this I have to see, maybe one factor may be the climate change, but exactly I cannot tell you climate change. So we have to see this may be a possibility of climate change unless we have the other parameter of the climate indicators like temperature, humidity, and other thing is required for to say that whether it is a place. In consultation with entomologists, it's very important to know about the vector of the vector-borne disease. So this is just a table showing the health determinants and health outcome that currently exists in mountainous region in our region like Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, China, India, Nepal. So we see that is present, that the +1 is present all over the country, and M is indicate that is present in the hilly and mountainous region. Let's go for India only. Glacial lake outburst, yes, it is there in hilly and mountainous region. Riverine plain floods, flash flood, okay, water scarcity, drought related food insecurity, it's there. Waterborne disease is there in specifically in mountainous. These are specific. This M are specifically for the hilly and the mountainous region. So emitting. So this waterborne disease, waterborne climate sensitive diseases are also there. Actually, that's what I say. It's already discussed in the previous presentation. Maybe I'll just skip it. That this there will be a change in dynamics of cholera, acute diarrheal disease, enteric fever, viral hepatitis. In general, this has coming down. This vector-borne disease is coming down, but some area is maybe increasing. Only particular area in the hilly and mountainous region we have to monitor them. But overall, it is coming down. So even for vector-borne disease also, overall it is decreasing all over India, all over this hilly and climate region, hilly and mountainous region also. But specifically in some area like new place for vector has been, as I shown in the previous example, that the vector has been changing from lower altitude to higher altitude in some areas. So this these are the epidemic potential vectors, disease, malaria, JE, dengue, chikungunya. So we have to do the we have to monitor these factors for the growth of the vectors along with the entomologists. So we have to have expert in the entomologist field to see about the habitat of the different vectors and in different climatic conditions, so that we can take care of this vector-borne disease. So lots of factors are affecting both climatic and even non-climatic also, because of deforestation, urbanization, okay, use of insecticides. So many factors are involving in this vector-borne disease also. So that's what the trend is not rising, but there is vector-borne are usually declining, but maybe due to public health measures. But we have to be alert for the climate change, that in some pockets or some area, even this vector-borne disease may emerge, or we can say re-emerging or emerging in a new area, but overall is decreasing. So the main focus of the presentation is we have to have a health sector adaptation plan. So how we can have this adaptation plan? Integrated surveillance system we already have in IDSP, as all state nodal officer IDSP and DSO, you have better experience how we can alert with any epidemic. So we have to have this maybe a modified integrated surveillance system, which we have to include some other factor also, like from IMD, Ministry of Forest and Climate. Okay, we have to take temperature, humidity, rainfall, and other part of the climate factor also. We can monitor that, then we can have an indicator of what will be the climate change is also indicating for us. And for this, we have to have trained manpower for the management of this climate change related disease condition, infectious disease. So basically for the health sector, we have to tune with the health problem of the hilly and mountainous region. Yeah, because of infectious disease, animal bites, maybe snake bite of different varieties. So we should be well equipped to handle this type of disease, which are specific for the mountainous and hilly region. And also achieving a universal health coverage. I know it is a challenge, but with efforts, to some extent, we can achieve the universal health coverage in the hilly and mountainous region also, so that the impact of climate change, we can adapt to it. So the most important part is actually we health sector has to be strong, resilient. We know that in our hilly and mountainous region, earthquake and landslide may be one of the factors. So earthquake resilient hospital with other safety measure has to be made, so that in case of any disaster of earthquakes, at least the hospital are well functioning and not disturbed. So like our hospital here in Negrims is a earthquake proof building. So this is good, one of the earthquake resilient hospital. And also we have to see, while you build the hospital in the, not to build in the danger area, like chance of landslide may happen in that area. So we have to choose the place how to construct the hospital, so that it is less risk for disaster, even in the hilly and mountainous region. So we have to send, as I told you, we have to strengthen the entomologist unit. So for better surveillance of the vector-borne disease vectors, so entomologist is required to know about where the vector have changed their habitat of stay, or maybe new area they are encroaching. And maybe we should have a well-equipped trauma center, because mostly with the disaster which are prone for the hilly and mountainous region, they are like landslide, earthquake, okay, avalanche. So we'll have this trauma. So people will need a trauma center in each strategic location, so for better management of these eventualities. So health department, we have to really coordinate it with different departments for the prevention and mitigation of climate change activities. So we have to, like a few hospital health system are already adopted a carbon-free alternative, like solar lights in the hospital or other part of it, waste management. So this is also one initiative towards the climate change, and especially in the northeastern states, which major part of the hilly region is involved and mountain. So collaboration with Regional Medical Research Center, which is ICMR Institute in Dibrugarh and Malaria Institute in Guwahati regarding the vector-borne disease. So they have a lot of experts also. So we'll coordinate with them also to have a better understanding of the dynamics of vector-borne disease vectors. So these are the key adaptation strategy for role and responsibilities. So we have to see the vulnerability assessment. As I told you, already one study has been done. So it can be continuously doing with the help of IMD, Indian Meteorological Department, Geology Survey of India, maybe even regional level space application center. So even the use of GIS can be done. Okay. So for forecasting of extreme weather is very useful. Actually, in the recent past, they always give us forecasts of the weather condition. So this is very good that people can mitigate and we can prevent many eventualities when any heavy rainfall is coming. That's one, for example. So baseline survey we have to do. State Health Department along with the district authorities we have to do, or with the block medical officer. In the hilly areas we have to do a baseline evaluation of our risk factor for different impact of climate on our health of the people. So we should have a robust monitoring and reporting system on climate sensitive disease, and this has to be linked with the data of climate, that is IMD and Geological Survey of India, and we should have this baseline to know about the prevalence of disease, whether it is going up or going down. We have to really monitor them. So stakeholders, so for doing this technical part, so NIGRIM is one. So we have to be associated with all the state health department who are in the hilly and mountainous region. So collectively we can make some action plan for how to go forward to go for this adaptation of this climate change, and also for capacity building along with NCDC and with our participation. We'll try how to improve this event training for the different stakeholder and also health department, how to tackle this climate change disease in the hilly and mountainous region. So there are so many other factors, like I'll not go much detail. So I think the slide will be shared. So development of zone specific action plan.
Dr. Pala, 5 more minutes for the presentation. Because...
Yeah. Okay,
right.
so that'll be more than enough. So even this awareness generation, developing tools, IEC we have to develop along with the state and district health. Okay, regarding to this climate, I mean hilly and mountainous specific disease. So we have to, actually this is just the beginning. Actually we know a long way to go. So we have to design some of the IEC material specific for this climate sensitive disease in this area. And monitoring, yes, we have to do monitoring and surveillance with the state health department. Okay, so as IDSP is doing, so I think they will continue to do with that. So that's what. So this is the outline of resource required is human resource. We have to train them in the specific area of the hilly and mountainous region. Okay, then we financial input, logistic required. So logistic, the supply based on the type of health problem we are having. So we have to be available the logistic required for that also. As I say, maybe snake bite, so we should have to have different type of, if particular snake bite, we should have the anti-venom which will counter all type of snake bite also. So this we have to do, and we have to do the risk communication of different areas based on the risk assessment and also situation management. So this is the risk cycle. Okay, I'll just skip this one. This framework also, we just have made this framework. We have not done this framework for risk assessment. I think this will develop this tool. Okay, these are like how we can prioritize the area for which are more vulnerable for earthquake in a specific, maybe district wise or block wise. We can do it. I just keep it open as of now. Okay, so that is what we need, this logistic for based on the health problem we are having. So I say establishing of IDSP, a modified one. So I'll just go with this summary here. So we'll end here and it take a lot of time, I know. So mountain and hilly are highly sensitive to climate change, and we should have a health adaptation plan of the subject area with the central and state level need priority to address this issue of the region. Okay, under this program, NIGRIM as a center of excellence and the state nodal officer, district nodal officer from other region with other expert need to work out the timeline and target for increasing adaptation and resiliency. Okay, to develop for development of health sector in these hilly areas. So as I tell you that this is a new beginning that we have to work together. That we also not this institute is not specific for hilly and climate. So we also working on it with the help of NCDC and other stakeholders. So we hope to develop along with the state and the other stakeholders. So the state nodal officer and district nodal officer have a great role to play also in this climate change impact in the hilly and mountainous region. So we hope we can work together. This is as a new beginning. So I thank you for all for listening. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Starpala, for a comprehensive presentation on hilly and mountainous region climate sensitive diseases. You took us through all the disaster, diseases, vulnerability, and how important the health adaptation plan are to be placed for adaptation and mitigation. So do we have any questions related to the presentation? Dr. Renuka, if you could update us.
Good evening, sir. Very nice presentations. Our participants have found it useful so far. There are no specific question, but sir, there is a comment by Dr. Nitish that earthquakes and tsunamis are not linked to climate change per se, but they are earthquake especially is an indirect impact because of deforestation, flash floods, and land. So that is something that needs to be, he wanted to have this conversation and he wanted to clarify this to the audience.
Okay, so as I told that this, so maybe any from the NCDC can answer this. I think he's right. Yes, maybe not directly to climate. Actually, I also not able to say whether it's a earthquake is direct to climate change. So only thing that this we can see that this earthquake is more prone. We are in the highest zone in this northeast zone. Almost all of us in the northeast are high zone for already high zone for earthquake. So as he rightly said, maybe not to climate change. So climate change maybe have some role indirectly or directly, but I think he's right only.
Yeah,
by default we are at this.
Yeah, I think so. Probably this is a complex situation where we cannot pinpoint to one specific area. So there are tectonic plates and geological situations wherein which it constantly changes. So therefore, earthquakes are the issues of the tectonic plates of on the Earth core systems. So this might be one reason. So apart from this, I think so we do not have any sort of questions or any comments. So we would be giving an opportunity to Dr. Alok sir, because we had stopped in between we did not have a clear audio from the presentation. So we would invite Dr. Alok Kumar to come back us, and so that you could update us regarding the status. If the sound clarity is good, we could give an opportunity to present his presentation right now. Dr. Alok sir.
Yes, I think now it's good. So do you want me to present from the very beginning or I left?
Sir, we have covered, I mean, probably we have moved a little bit far away from the presentation. Hope so, giving you a 10 or 15 minutes time down the line. So if you could brief us from the last presentation, so that would be useful for the session. So
last presentation means where I left last time? Onwards.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think I left probably on slide 30, 36 or so. Can I have the presentation, please?
Do we need to share the presentation, or you would be sharing from your side, sir?
No, because I thought that you will be sharing. You can share.
All right, all right. We'll take a chance of sharing it with you.
Right, right. Yes, I can start from here.
Yes, sir. Please.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you for your patience, and I'm sorry for the technical glitch that happened at the time. So if I go from this slide onwards, so we have discussed earlier the effects of season, temperature, precipitation on food and waterborne diseases. So now we'll look at the fourth parameter, which is sea level rise. So sea levels are expected to rise worldwide, associated with both melting glaciers and polar ice caps and thermal expansion. The effects of sea level rise will impact coastal zones via periodic flooding that are called storm surges, as well as incremental rise in water level. This will result in a decrease in freshwater availability, loss of infrastructure, and as well as an influx of marine pathogens will also happen. So next one, please. This figure shows the areas considered to be highly vulnerable to increased sea levels due to both their elevation and population sizes. Many of these are in the delta areas that must already deal with periodic flooding. The 20 coastal cities where average annual losses increase most, I mean, in relative terms of 2050 compared to 25. In the case of optimistic sea level rise, if adaptation maintains only current different standards of flood probability. So here we can see there are, I mean, across the globe, especially among the cities in the coastal areas, many of them are highly vulnerable from sea level rise. And if we look at the situation in India, next one, please. India being close to the equator, the subcontinent would see much higher rises in sea levels than the higher latitudes. The sea level rise and storm surges would lead to saltwater intrusion into the coastal areas, impacting agriculture, degrading groundwater quality, contaminating drinking water, and possibly causing a rise in diarrheal cases and cholera outbreaks, as the cholera bacterium survives longer in saline water. Kolkata and Mumbai, both densely populated cities, are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of sea level rise, tropical cyclones, and riverine flooding. And actually, these slides are prepared some time back. And if we go by the recent reports released by the IPCC, there are some other cities listed there, like other coastal cities like Chennai, and along with Kolkata, the other areas in West Bengal, are also listed there as highly vulnerable. Next one, please. Among the bacteria, Vibrio species also show a strong seasonal trend, with the highest cases reported in summer months and a direct relationship with increasing temperature. This Vibrio genus includes common marine species, and only a few of which are pathogenic to humans. However, among this group are three significant pathogens that are Vibrio vulnificus, Vibrio parahemolyticus, and Vibrio cholerae. And all of these Vibrios replicate in the marine or estuarine environment, especially at warm water temperatures. Usually their growth begins at temperature more than 15 degrees Celsius. Now, both Vibrio vulnificus and Vibrio parahemolyticus infections are commonly associated with shellfish. But Vibrio cholerae is unique in its ability to grow in fresh waters also and can be transmitted through drinking water. Additionally, Vibrio cholerae is unique in its ability to be transmitted person to person. Because these are primarily environmental bacteria rather than primarily enteric, and they proliferate easily in the environment, more is known about the mechanisms linking climate drivers to the pathogen itself. Next one. Because the Vibrio species are native marine bacteria, this group may be expected to be among the primary concerns with waterborne diseases associated with sea level rise. In many areas of the world that are particularly prone to sea level rise, such as many parts of South Asia, Vibrio cholerae is already an ongoing problem, resulting in a large number of cases of cholera. And because cholera has both an environmental and human host, outbreaks can be initiated or perpetuated by either influx of estuarine water or by wastewater contamination during the outbreaks. In 2000, a study described the use of remote sensing to model the highest risk period for cholera in the Bay of Bengal. The authors investigated multiple types of remotely sensed data to attempt these models. And here are the advanced very high resolution radiometer satellite images that show changes in sea surface height by month. The red color indicates high water levels and the blue color indicates low water levels. These data can act as a proxy for marine or estuarine water influx. Next one. By combining both sea surface height data and sea surface temperature data, trends with cholera rates can begin to emerge. Like in this chart, peaks in cholera cases over a study period that is in the black solid line. So the peaks of cholera cases correspond with peaks in either sea surface height or sea surface temperature. You can see them highlighted in red and blue circles. When peaks in sea surface height, that is marine water intrusion and proxy for sea level rise scenario, coincide with peaks in sea surface temperature, which coincides with proliferation of bacteria, we see the greatest peaks of cholera. From this study, we might speculate that increases in both temperature and sea level as projected in climate change scenarios would increase the burden from cholera. In fact, at NICED, I also conducted one study some time back where we found a strong correlation with sea surface temperature with outbreaks of with occurrence of cholera and diarrhea also. Next one, please. So we are finishing this module, which is module 8. So before we finish, let's look at the measures that can be taken to address water and foodborne diseases associated with climate change. Here we can mention about one ongoing program. The image that you see in the top right is an example of a project called Swasth, which means strengthening water, air, sanitation, and hygiene, treasuring health, which is operative in Nepal, and which is a practical program attempting to address the fact that water sanitation related diseases are amongst the top pillars in Nepal. So these kinds of programs are also operative in many other states, including India. So these are some of the examples that can also be undertaken at the local level, depending on their own scenarios, to tackle with the problem of waterborne diseases due to climate changes. So next one, please. In summary, evidence, although limited, suggests that waterborne diseases will increase under projected climate change scenarios due to effects from increased temperature, heavy storm events, drought, and sea level rise. As we will move forward, it is important that we continue to collect basic surveillance data on these climate sensitive diseases, as well as improve our understanding of the mechanisms by which climate influences these pathogens. Next one. Rapid glacier melting would result in a drastic reduction in the contribution to the river flow. Current permanent rivers would become seasonal. Melting glaciers together with disturbed rainfall patterns will increase the amount of water-induced hazards such as floods, flash floods, landslides, debris flows, and droughts. Rainfalls will decrease in high latitudes and decrease in most subtropical land regions, many of which are already affected by drought. Population growth and increasing demand for water due not only to higher temperatures, demand for irrigation water will increase by 10% for an increase in temperature of 1 degree Celsius, but also to higher standards of living. Such increasing demand of water will be there, and it would adversely affect more than 1 billion people by 2050s. Increasing withdrawal rates of groundwater and decreasing recharge time of the aquifers will accelerate the water crisis, notably in drier areas. Next one. Rapid glacier melting would result in drastic reduction in the contribution of river flow. Oh, sorry. Our ability to adapt to and implement basic public health practices to protect water quality may mitigate the projected disease trends. Actually, this is part of the earlier slide, so please go to the next. Yes, yes. So our ability to adapt to and implement basic public health practices to protect water quality may mitigate the projected disease trends. These measures include following the same sound practices that the public health community always uses to prevent diseases, including awareness of vulnerabilities, investments in the upkeep and development of infrastructure to ensure clean water, and focused attention on best management practices for treatment of water. While trends suggest that the risk to human health due to water stress and water and foodborne disease, adequate attention and investment in sound sanitation practices and education of the public will go a long way in mitigating these risks. I think this is all. Thank you. So we covered this aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I think so. A larger part of the presentation, all the participants missed it out.
Right.
And I know it was a lack of, it was a technical fault, glitches that occur on a online virtual platform. Anyhow, it was a very good presentation. We could have seen the complete version of the presentation. And now that I think so, do we have, Dr. Renuka, do we have any sort of questions regarding the presentations? If you could update us.
No, Dr. Praveen, there are not many questions. And a general appreciation, Dr. Anupama shares her regards and said it was a very nice presentation. And people were really looking forward to it. Some of them had to leave because it's getting late and there are other duties that the officers have to take care also. I'm sure once they see the presentations, they would be reaching out to sir for any other observations or questions that they have.
Sure, sure.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Renuka. And thank you, sir, for the elaborate presentation on waterborne diseases. And then I would like to end this session for today. And then in the chat box, we have already placed a quiz link wherein which you can participate. And then let us know what exactly the awareness that the participant have been understood through this session. So tomorrow again, we would be joining you at the same time. And then we have shared the link. Kindly get yourself registered and then logged in to the session so that we would be carrying it on different, again, various climatic sensitive illnesses, which would be on vector-borne disease, zoonotic disease, and a special topic on green and climate resilient infrastructures, coastal area related to climate sensitive illnesses or health issues related to climate change. So tomorrow would be the last day of the training session. So we would like you to join tomorrow at 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you to all the participants. See you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you all the participants. Requesting you to share the quiz link with your colleagues who had to leave and other colleagues who could not attend the training today due to some unforeseen reason. Please share the quiz with everyone from the NPCCHH program in your state. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.